Look how he goes, only 35 years old, and already a star of modern medicine, said Sven pathos, successful at work, gets the most complex operations, for which patients are ready to carry him in their arms. Don't be a clown, Daniel said, embarrassed, saying hello to his friend. They'd met when they were students and kept in touch after graduation, occasionally meeting at a restaurant or, as they did now, at work. It's a well-deserved honor. It's a pity it's the most recognition you can get in a normal city hospital, Sven smiled slyly. Everything is fine now. But are you sure it will always be like this? You've offered me 1,000 times to go private. I've refused 1,000 times. Why are we having this conversation again? Why do you keep working for pennies? There's no equipment, no prospects, no opportunity for career advancement. The head doctor won't even pay you a bonus, because there's only enough budget money to line his own pockets. Will you stop trading your talent for a pittance? It's not about money, Daniel shook his head. What is it? Enlighten me, O great guru, Sven smiled sadly. You wouldn't understand. Daniel dismissed him. This is my destiny, and this is where I interned and became a real doctor. It's a good stepping stone. I agree. But it should be the first of many. Sven didn't give up. If anything happens, there's no one here to protect you. The local bosses like to squeeze all the juice out of you. And if you need backup, trust me, they won't be thinking long term. They'll only have their own back. Make no mistake. Open your eyes. I think you're wrong, Daniel smiled. He'd always had a strange affection for the hospital that had taken him in as a green, hopeful newcomer. It was here that he felt confident, truly needed. He was proud of the progress he'd made here. Thoughts of a transfer were depressing, like betrayal, which Daniel didn't like at all, so he always gently but adamantly refused offers to move to a warmer place. Okay, suit yourself, Sven said hopelessly. How is Angela doing? The seemingly ordinary topic stirred a painful suspicion in Daniel's soul. He frowned, then turned away, hiding his gaze from his trusted friend. Could she really have done that? To me, ran through his head, depressing the thought. Yeah, so there's a little rough patch, Daniel said. And what did your love boat crash into? Sven asked sympathetically. I suspect that my rich, beautiful wife has a lover, Daniel said with difficulty. And that lover is no less than the mayor himself. Oh, are you sure? Yes, I'd heard rumors and suspicions from colleagues that Angela was unfaithful to me, but I'd always denied it, didn't want to believe the sordid stories. But lately she's not herself. Always hiding something. She hides her phone and refuses to be close to me. I'm sorry, Sven shook his head. I'm sorry, of course. Angela's parents were against your marriage from the very beginning. Do you remember how they said, "Why do we need a doctor when we can marry the deputy governor's son?" The only hope was that you become a highly paid specialist. But do you think that's really the point? I'm sure her mom's been pushing her around a lot, and who knows how successful these talks are. Sven spread his hands. Daniel wrinkled his nose painfully. All the thoughts of his wife's betrayal hurt his soul, forcing him to disbelieve and turn away from the obvious arguments. Daniel loved Angela too much to believe in her deception. The wedding happened anyway. She chose me in the end, Daniel said, clinging to his last hope. And she chose me with her heart, not her wallet. My parents are poor. I got where I am through hard work and sweat and blood. Well, I hope it's as you say. It's all just rumors. Sven clapped his friend cheerfully on the shoulder. Well, I have to go. If you know the number, call me when you change your mind about this whole. There's no way Angela would betray me, Daniel muttered under his breath. As he got home from work, he noticed that it was already evening. All his duties for the day were done, and he was able to leave the workplace. Only his soul remained restless. The conversation with Sven had stirred up murky waters of suspicion, making him replay ridiculous gossip in his head. So he drove all the way home in his darkest thoughts. Honey, I'm home, Daniel announced his arrival loudly. There was no answer, but the house was clearly not empty. The light was on in the hallway, and his wife's cloak and an unfamiliar black coat were nestled on the coat rack. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Maybe they're guests, he thought, trying not to give in to jealousy. Angela, are you home? Daniel said again, to make his presence known. The answer was silence. As he made his way to the bedroom, he glimpsed a table in the living room, with 2 glasses of wine and snacks. On the floor between the rooms was a string of clothes, as if they had been removed in a fit of passion. And worst of all, there was a distinctive sound coming from the door, accompanied by a creaking mattress. What's going on in here? Daniel shouted as he threw open the bedroom door. A horrifying scene appeared before his eyes. Angela, completely unclothed, flinched at his shout, frantically covering herself with the sheet. And next to her, or rather above her, was the mayor himself, Mr. Gregory. "Daniel, you," Angela started to say. "Get out of here." Boy, the mayor cut her off, unhappy at being interrupted. "I'm supposed to get out of my own house." Daniel immediately flared up. "Get out of my house, or I'll punch you in the face," Mr. Gregory growled more menacingly. "Don't you try it, you pig. You'll go to the emergency room." Daniel was out of control, feeling the anger of jealousy stirring in his blood. "What did you say?" Mr. Gregory got up from the bed and then stepped in close, glaring menacingly at Daniel. But the lad didn't waste any time with pointless talk. "Oh, you little rat," howled the mayor as Daniel twisted his arm, not listening to Angela's screams. He led her lover out into the corridor and then simply threw her out the door. Mr. Gregory lost his balance, tripped and rolled down the stairs. "He's naked. What a disgrace. What if the neighbors see?" Angela cried out. "You'd better take care of your reputation," Daniel snapped at her. "You're a doormat," Daniel said angrily. "You should have thought of throwing the mayor down the stairs so that he had to run out into the street in his underwear." Mr. Matthew, the chief medical officer, thumped his fist on the table. "He wasn't in his underwear. He was naked," Daniel said glumly. "Please, don't give me any more details," the doctor said, disgraced the man as best he could. "Of course the mayor isn't going to forgive that. Do you have any idea of the consequences? What would you do if you found him in bed with your wife?" Daniel said. "I don't know and I don't want to know," but no, Mr. Matthew said. "Anyway, Mr. Gregory's been in touch. He's contacted me directly, and he wants me to fire you today." "What do you think I can do, Daniel? Do you have any idea who the people behind him are?" "Gregory's the mayor of the city." "That's what he said. Do whatever you want, but I don't want to see him on my land again." Daniel frowned. He didn't regret his hot-headedness. After all, in essence, he had done the right thing. But his wife's betrayal had hit him hard. His shattered heart whimpered with longing, his soul turned upside down. The whole world, so familiar and understandable, suddenly turned against Daniel, driving him deeper and deeper into despair. "I'll be honest, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've had a lot on my mind. I mean, you're a first-rate professional. But I just can't go against Mr. Gregory. Do you understand? We'll have to break up. What can we do?" "So it's over. After all I've done for this hospital," Daniel grinned dryly. "All I can offer is a transfer to the backwoods of the country and downgrade. You can keep practicing medicine there. A year or two, you'll forget all about it, and then you can go back." "What kind of people contacted you? Who cares enough to care about that bureaucrat's affairs?" Daniel asked tiredly. Mr. Matthew pursed his lips, staring out the window. Daniel knew where the wind was coming from without his comments. Angela's parents had long wanted to get rid of their only daughter's unwanted husband. They were happy to use their influence to banish him from the city. There was nothing they could do about it, and that made the guy even angrier, making him feel helpless. "So you're just going to fire him like that, for nothing?" "Believe me, you can get dirt on anyone if you need it, but I'm offering you a transfer, not an article of honor. Technically, we'll write you up some minor offense to punish you and send you to the provinces. You'll sit there for a while," said Mr. Matthew. As he left the head doctor's office, Daniel felt like he was at the bottom of a deep abyss. He didn't slam the door, but reached into his pocket for his phone and dialed a familiar number. "I already know everything," Brother Sven said unhappily on the other end of the line. "What do you think?" "You're in big trouble. You've got a lot of excitement going on. At least it's unofficial. The mayor doesn't want the affair to get out. That's why he didn't involve the police. How are you feeling?" "Lucy, I got kicked out of the hospital." "You were right. Nobody stepped up." "Is the invitation to transfer to you still open?" Daniel asked tiredly. "I'd love to, but the local authorities are pushing back. They're under pressure, too. If it had been right away, we would have defended it. But no one wants to deal with the disgraced fugitive from the outside," Sven said in a low voice. "It's not good at all. I've been instructed not to take you anywhere. Maybe at least as a therapist. They won't even hire you as a nurse in a sobering-up center. I'm sorry. I did the best I could. I really did." Sven apologized to his friend. "All right, never mind. It's not your fault," Daniel brushed it off. He hung up the phone, not wanting to show his broken state in front of his friend. His wife and her lover had completely wrecked his life in one day. Daniel hadn't felt this lousy in a long time, maybe never. "I guess getting away from all this intrigue isn't such a bad idea," Daniel said. "How do you do?" "Hello, Ivan," the head of the local administration, smiled cordially. We've been waiting for you for a long time. Can you show us the hospital at once? Daniel asked, trying to avoid tedious appointments. That's the first thing, of course, Ivan nodded. But this isn't a hospital in the sense you're used to. The paramedic station was nice, spacious, and had all the basic equipment, only there was no one to run it. Mr. Ivan put Daniel in the car. They drove a short distance. It was a small town indeed. By the way, did you ask for legal support? Mr. Ivan suddenly remembered. Yes, I want to get a divorce, but I don't quite understand how to do it remotely. I thought you'd help as a greeting, Daniel said with a wry grin. Does the wife agree? Mr. Ivan said understandingly. She's more than willing. Then we'll do it. Don't worry, Mr. Ivan clapped Daniel cheerfully on the shoulder and stopped in front of a small 2-story building. Well, here's your new domain. Own it, he said solemnly, handing over the keys. Let me know when you're settled in. In the meantime, I'll take care of your business. Daniel got out of the car, looking round the paramedic station. Wooden walls, but at least the windows were plastic. The roof didn't sparkle with newness, but it looked sturdy enough. Suddenly, there was some kind of commotion under the stairs. Someone huffed and panted, then scrambled out. The puppy jumped out at Daniel's feet. What are you? The doctor said in surprise, looking at the funny little fellow. Yeah, I get it. A watchman. We need staff. Daniel squatted down and scratched the puppy behind the ear. He looked up at him with big, kind eyes. It was obvious that he had been looking for a home for a long time, sadly looking at passers-by. But they just passed by. You've been abandoned too, Daniel said, feeling his wounded heart ache. So we have to stick together. Hello, you're our new doctor, aren't you? Came from somewhere overhead. Oh, hello. I guess I am. And you are? Daniel smiled, looking at the older woman. My name is Miss Iris. I'm sort of the local mayor. It's a small town, but it's a friendly one. So I keep up with all the local news, organize community events. I try to keep the atmosphere friendly. That's great, Daniel nodded, noting the gossip columnist and socially active citizen. Have you made a friend yet? Miss Iris nodded at the puppy. I couldn't stand it. I picked it up. He's sitting there, sad. Now it's just the two of us. Two lonely people. Daniel grinned. You're welcome. You know, this place has been in need of a good doctor for a long time, and a specialist of your caliber is a huge plus. Whatever you are, famous or not, we're lucky to have you. Famous? Daniel raised an eyebrow. It seemed fame was beginning to follow him. I don't know how to put this. There were calls to the administration before you arrived, trying to give you a bad reputation. But Mr. Ivan's an experienced man. He knew what was what. He even met you in person to make sure, and he was pleased. You see, that's flattering, Daniel said doubtfully. Well, you'd better get settled in and look around. By the way, I didn't just drop by for a chat. Miss Iris fumbled in her pocket and handed Daniel another key. It's for your new place. It's an old house. It's not very old, but it's livable. The log cabin's solid. The roof doesn't leak, and they even put in gas this year. The house has long been on the city's balance sheet as service housing. You can't even tell who it used to belong to. Thank you, Daniel thanked Miss Iris sincerely, trying to make a positive impression. He was going to live in this town for a while, after all, and he wanted to stay on good terms with the people who lived there, especially those who carried the news around town. Well, Mrs. Torrey, our blood pressure stabilized. You can stop taking the medication, but don't work too hard on your vegetable garden. Remember, it's best not to exert yourself, Daniel urged. Thank you, Daniel. Oh, golden man, I'm so glad they sent you, Mrs. Torrey smiled. This is for you. The woman rustled through her bag and placed a carton of eggs on the table. A liter jar of milk and some pickles sat next to it. All my own, homemade. Eat to your heart's content. You shouldn't have. I'm just doing my job. I get paid. Daniel shook his head in embarrassment. Take it, take it. You're so skinny. You've come all the way from your town. Why should we starve you here? Mrs. Torrey thanked the doctor once more and went about her business. Daniel smiled as he cleared the food from the table. I still can't get used to it. It's strange. But it's nice, Daniel said, turning to Charlie, the puppy he'd recently picked up. The locals aren't rich, but they're friendly and always willing to share. Charlie yapped from his corner. Obviously, it's not for nothing, but for the doctor's services. But it's still nice to be appreciated, Daniel thought. Are you two having another conversation? I heard Mary's voice. Of course, Charlie's my best conversationalist, Daniel grinned as he helped her open the door. And I don't count, Mary said with feigned offense. Best after you, of course. You're the best. His words only made Mary frown. Limping on her right leg, she went into the waiting room and sat down on the couch where the paramedic usually received visitors. Husband drunk again. Daniel shook his head as he switched on the kettle. Yeah, he's been on a bender since the accident. The bastard wrecked the car. They could barely fix it, and not a scratch on him. And now I'm going to limp for the rest of my life, Mary said sadly. She had been coming to the paramedic station almost from the very first day, and had already become a good friend to Daniel. By the way, do you remember the boy you had to help? Mary suddenly spoke up. Oh yes, my first patient. He had angina. I could barely diagnose it. I'm a surgeon, not a general practitioner, Daniel shrugged embarrassedly. It's okay. You're doing great. And the boy's doing great. He sends his thanks. Daniel smiled, remembering that day. They had become friends with Mary then. She'd come to him for advice about his leg or just to sit through another drunken fit. The weather's changing again, my knee's on fire. I hope it doesn't rain, Mary grumbled. Try the ointment I prescribed, Daniel shook his head. Also, I've been on the phone with my colleagues. I don't want to get their hopes up, but they're saying it's possible to do surgery, corrective surgery. If all goes well, the limp will almost disappear. Expensive, isn't it? Mary exhaled sadly. We'll see what we can do. There must be some government quotas. Thank you. You're a true friend. Daniel smiled at Mary. He liked her both as a person and as a woman. However, despite their liking, they maintained a strictly friendly relationship. Her husband, of course, was against even such a friendship, and Daniel himself was not yet completely divorced. But probably the young people still felt something for each other, but they were afraid to admit it, even to themselves. I hope Randy didn't see me leave, Mary sighed. I've had enough of these jealous scenes, Mary said. I'm still ashamed of you. Oh, come on. We had a couple of man-to-man talks. Don't mind me, Daniel dismissed it. Yeah, we did. You made a scene in public. He's a heroic lover, like I cheated on him. At these words, the door of the paramedic's office opened, and the man who had caused the discussion appeared on the threshold. Randy was barely on his feet, clinging to the wall and looking round with a glassy stare. I knew you'd be here, Randy muttered when he saw Mary. When Charlie heard the drunkard's voice, he barked at him menacingly. Why are you here again? Mary sighed sorrowfully. I'm here on business. My knee hurts because of you, by the way. Oh, you, exhaled Randy. First of all, don't talk to a lady like that. And secondly, go home. We don't serve drunks here, Daniel said sternly. The owner was backed up by a puppy with a loud bark. And Don Juan himself, Randy said with difficulty, come on, let's go outside and settle this. Daniel looked skeptically at the alcoholic, but he grabbed a chair in the hallway and rushed toward them. Mary shrieked and covered her face with her hands in fear. Daniel ducked just in time as the faux leather chair slammed into the wall, shattering into splinters. Charlie whimpered and hid in his box. He was too small for such a fight, after all. Here we go, Randy spat angrily. The bully stopped, breathing heavily, his eyes full of rage, and turned to his wife. Randy even grabbed her shoulder, but Daniel jumped to him and deftly knocked his hand aside. Why are you messing with us? Randy howled in pain. We've been living like this. Get out of here. Go away, Daniel said threateningly. Don't step on me. The man backed away fearfully. As he backed away clumsily, Daniel caught him by the sleeve and shoved him backwards. Randy rattled off the small porch, shouted something resentful, and wandered away. I think it's becoming my trademark to throw offenders down the stairs, Daniel smiled guiltily. Mary only sobbed. She was afraid to get up from the couch, slumped against the wall, her shoulders shaking. Daniel crouched gently beside her, then put his arm around her and pulled her to him. Mary snuggled into his shoulder, feeling her sobs subside. It's going to be okay. Don't worry, Daniel said. Mary exhaled without breaking the embrace. They just continued to sit next to each other, savoring each other's warmth. It seemed that at that moment their sympathy began to grow into something more, turning into a platonic love affair. Daniel, we're in trouble, Miss Iris shouted. What's wrong? Daniel looked up from his medical records. It was already late afternoon. More than a week had passed since the fight, and life didn't bode well for any adventures at all. Well, there's a car stuck in the ditch at the entrance to town, Miss Iris exhaled. Then have them call a tractor. What's it got to do with me? There's a pregnant woman behind the wheel, going into labor. She's going into labor. She says she's got triplets in her belly, and she can't give birth on her own. Why was she on the road? Daniel was quick to ask. She has a cottage in the neighboring village. She wanted to carry her babies in the fresh air. but the doctor ordered her to have a cesarean. She was traveling through us and got stuck outside the town, Miss Iris explained. All right, tell them to bring her here, and I'll get the equipment ready so we can deliver the baby. Are you sure you're up to it? Well, I am a surgeon after all, Daniel smugly chuckled. Miss Iris ran away, and he began to consider what he had on hand. Despite the rural nature of the paramedic's office, it had all the medical supplies and equipment he needed for simple operations. Charlie yapped from his corner. Right, mate? I nearly forgot. You'll have to wait outside. We need to be completely sterile in here. Well, you were worried, Daniel said optimistically as he took the last baby. The mother in labor, Mrs. Sally, leaned back tiredly on the couch, gasping for air. Even without a cesarean section, Mary exhaled in amazement as she volunteered to be an assistant and, despite her inexperience, did a pretty good job. After calming down and handling the babies, Daniel examined the newborns. You're a miracle, Mary said again, picking up the third baby. All three were healthy and strong and were already lying in their prepared places. You are the miracle, Daniel replied. And I'm a product of science, Daniel grinned embarrassedly. The operation seemed to have brought him and Mary even closer together, forming a real heart-to-heart bond between them. Thank you, Mrs. Sally said. You saved my life and the children's lives. I'll never forget it. I'll thank you for the rest of my life, believe me. Well, don't exaggerate, Daniel became even more embarrassed. It's a routine procedure. A trained obstetrician would have done a much better job. No, you're a real wizard, Mrs. Sally shook her head, but why are you working in the middle of nowhere? That's not the middle of nowhere, Mary blurted out. How I got here is a long story, Daniel said, but believe me, after talking to the locals and seeing what they're like, I don't regret moving. At those words, the doctor and Mary's eyes met, as if a spark had passed between them. The woman immediately caught the feeling, and Daniel felt his heart start to beat a little faster. Sure you don't want to move to the big city, Mrs. Sully asked. What could I do? Daniel shrugged it off, remembering the pomp and circumstance of his exile. He'd crossed some very powerful people. I'm sorry, but I don't think you can compete with them. Mrs. Sully smiled meaningfully. Daniel didn't understand her reaction, so he simply put the oddity down to a side effect of the difficult labor. They decided to let Mrs. Sally rest in the ward, only helping her onto a dry bed. You're not going home, Mary said, stretching tiredly. It was dark outside the window. It was past midnight, and the town had long since fallen into slumber. Someone must look after our patient. What if she needs something? Daniel smiled. By the way, I can't remember where I saw her. It was either on TV or at a party. She was a big deal. Somebody's daughter, some politician's daughter, some businessman's daughter. I don't know. You city folk know best, Mary said jokingly. I think I'll stay with you and help you if you need it. You don't have to. You're so tired. I just don't want this moment to end. I just want to be with you for a little while longer. Sally, daughter, I was so worried about you, Mr. Andrew. The governor of the capital rushed to hug the young mother. Why didn't you come to the doctor? Where have you been? What's wrong with the children? Calm down, Mrs. Sully smiled. There have been unforeseen circumstances, but your grandchildren and I are fine. We're stuck in a small town in the country, and if it hadn't been for Daniel, the local paramedic, things might not have ended so well. Mr. Andrew kissed Mrs. Sally on the cheek, looking at her face worriedly. He loved her as his own daughter, even though she was actually adopted, but that never made any difference. Dad, I want to thank him. He saved our lives, Mrs. Sally said in a hushed voice. Well, do you want to see the hero? I took a picture, of course. Mrs. Sully handed him her phone, where she'd sneakily snapped a picture of Daniel at work. That's the same one. Yeah, I know. The mayor's taken a shine to him, but it's completely undeserved. Daniel's a good guy and a great professional. It wouldn't be good for us to lose such a valuable manpower because of Mr. Gregory's affair. Well, I don't know. Mr. Andrew pressed his lips together, as he always did in moments of thought. His governorship would be enough to not only bring Daniel back, but to offer him a good place in the hospital. Please, we owe him. His daughter continued to insist. You do realize that he's going to get a lot of attention as your protege, and he won't fail. You should see how he works. He delivered 3 without a C-section. Can you imagine how high he could go in time? All right, I'll give him a call. We'll go over the details, said Mr. Andrew. Daniel, telephone for you, Mary said in an agitated voice. She had been staying at the paramedic station more and more often lately. And after the big delivery, she had taken a part-time job as a secretary in addition to her main job as a milkmaid. What did they want? Daniel said melancholically, flicking through the papers. It's the governor with a proposal for you, Daniel frowned. He wasn't used to expecting anything good from people in high places, especially after the unfortunate fight with the mayor. I'm listening, Daniel said, picking up the phone. Hello, this is the governor, Mr. Andrew Patterson, he introduced himself. To what do I owe the pleasure? Daniel asked glumly. I'm the father of Mrs. Sally, whom you literally saved last night. I'm calling to thank you, to express my appreciation, and to make you a favorable offer. All doubt immediately dissipated, giving way to genuine surprise. That's why her face looked familiar, Daniel thought, raising his eyebrows in surprise. You're welcome. It's my job. How is she feeling? Mrs. Sally left the paramedics' office in a hurry. She's not rested at all. She's fine. She's got the best specialists looking after her. They're not as good as you, but they know a thing or two, the governor said sincerely. Daniel, would you like to come back? The question took the doctor by surprise. Life seems to be taking another turn. You really don't know when to expect a catch, he thought, clutching the telephone receiver with his fingers. Even if I wanted to. Surely you've heard about our conflict with Mr. Gregory, Daniel answered cautiously. Don't worry about that. I have enough influence to settle this misunderstanding. Let's get straight to the point. I'm offering you the post of chief physician of the very hospital from which you were transferred to the province. The offer was so generous that it made me feel devastated. Strange, if I had been offered that a couple of weeks ago, I wouldn't have hesitated, Daniel thought, looking at Mary. She was sitting quietly at her desk, anxiously waiting for the conversation to end. It was obvious Mary was worried that she and Daniel might have to break up. You know, I appreciate the offer, but I have to decline, the doctor shook his head. Why? Mr. Andrew Patterson was surprised. I remember in one interview he said that you felt you belonged there. So isn't it time you took over as my representative and confidant? We could run a good campaign, build a rapport between government and medicine. It's just that there are circumstances that make me not want to leave, Daniel smiled. Mary was glad to hear that, feeling her cheeks blush. Their relationship was growing deeper every day, and it was getting harder and harder to hide their true feelings. She didn't know what would happen next, but she certainly didn't want to break up with Daniel, and she was sure the young man felt the same way. That's a shame. I would have loved to work with you. It's not every day you come across such talent, the governor said, genuinely upset. Maybe I can do something for you there? You know, I think I have an idea of how we could work together, Daniel suddenly said. I'm listening. How about we connect the government and the provincial medical profession? Maybe we should pay attention not only to the city, but also to the provinces to help. For example, Mr. Andrew Patterson said thoughtfully, restructure the local paramedic station, equip it with modern equipment, turn it into a full-fledged hospital, where people not only from the local town, but also from the villages could go. It's an interesting proposal, but there's a lot of work to be done, said Mr. Andrew Patterson in a businesslike manner. Are you sure you can handle it? After all, it is you who will have to lead the event. Of course, Daniel said with a twinkle in his eye, without a shadow of a doubt. Good, I like your attitude. It's an excellent proposal that will help people, and at the same time it will bring me more votes in the next election. The governor immediately began to point out the benefits. Everything will be exactly as you suggest. All that remains is to allocate funds and recruit staff for the future clinic. Do not worry about the staff. I already have a few people in mind, so you can leave that entirely to me, Daniel said, already starting to make far-reaching plans in his head. Sven, hi. Do you have a minute? Daniel said, waiting for his friend to answer the phone. Of course I do. What's up? What's up? How's it going? I've been trying to call you, but you're always unavailable, Sven said with a hint of resentment. I was worried. Everything is fine. You wouldn't believe it. I've been put in charge of a new hospital here in the province. Mr. Andrew Patterson, our governor, is building a model medical center to show he cares for everyone in the province. Yeah, I've heard of it, but I didn't think you worked there, especially after that scandal, Sven said in surprise. How did it come out? It's a long story. I'll just say I was in the right place at the right time. I saved the governor's daughter, Daniel grinned. That's a hell of a story. By the way, did you hear the news? The mayor who threw you out of town has been removed from their posts, along with the head doctor of your hospital. Now they're out of favor. Don't know where to go or who to apologize to. Well, that wasn't my initiative, Daniel shook his head dazedly. So why don't you go back? We're better off here, aren't we? No, I'm gonna have to pass. I've got a great job here now. And there's a romantic interest, too, Daniel replied. The thought of Mary gave a pleasant warmth to his chest. They got along well, they were easy to get along with, and they were always on the same page. Daniel had forgotten about his ex-wife, who'd done such a despicable thing to him. Soul wounds began to heal rapidly, and all these favorable changes in his personality were entirely Mary's merit. I see. He settled in, away from the snake's nest. Sven grinned. He seemed genuinely happy for his friend. Why did I call? Daniel came back from his pleasant reverie to reality. I have a business proposition for you now, too. How would you like to work for me? The salary's almost double. Office housing plus bonus plus advanced training, plus the best equipment in the area. I really need an assistant I can count on. What do you say? How can you be so generous? Sven whistled. I'm telling you, the governor has invested a lot of money. I've already lured a lot of colleagues from the city. I gave them good positions, and now we work together. No pressure, no corruption. Everyone's in their place. The only thing missing from the team is you. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to leave everything, move. What have you got to lose? The flat is rented, you're single, and you won't lose money, Daniel persisted. You know, that sounds really good, so let me think about it. And then I'll let you know, Sven thought. Take as long as you need. I'm keeping a place for you. I hope you make the right decision. Daniel hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. Things were really looking up. There were a lot of prospects and, most importantly, he wanted to work. Charlie stirred under the table. Daniel felt his wet nose poke his hand resentfully. Yeah, you're my main assistant, of course. That was just a figure of speech. Daniel's life was beginning to brighten up again, and the only thing missing from this beautiful picture was Mary. Let's be honest, Randy, I'm in love with Mary and I intend to marry her, Daniel said clearly, sitting across from the drunk. He wasn't going to hide his crush any longer. The feelings were too strong. And most importantly, the crush was mutual. Daniel could feel it in every look, every phrase. The only obstacle to their happiness was her obnoxious husband. Let's settle this once and for all. Like men, Daniel continued. What did you think? Just show up, make speeches, take my woman, Randy hissed angrily. He'd been drunk since this morning. Whether he was still reeling from last night, or had already had another drink. What do you need her for? You don't live together anyway. Vodka's the most important thing in the world to you. Divorce Mary, stop torturing her and yourself. What do you want? I'll give you money. How much do you want? Just leave us alone, exclaimed Daniel. Do you, city boy, think you can buy everything? Randy said. I've known her since high school, our whole lives together, and everything was fine until you showed up. Daniel just shook his head. Randy clearly had no grasp of reality or didn't want to see the obvious. They'd never been happy with Mary, had they? Randy had married her simply for social status, using the girl as an ornament. Mary didn't know where to go, because all her friends told her that a woman shouldn't be alone. Small town, not much to choose from. And so they both fell victim to prejudice, quietly disliking each other, but still staying together. You know, a couple, Daniel said carefully. Are you a couple? Randy immediately snapped at him. He jumped up from the couch and tried to throw his fists at Daniel. The doctor easily dodged the blow over his head and pushed his opponent back onto the couch. Calm down. I tried that once before. It didn't work, Daniel said warningly, alluding to Randy's last attempt at a fight. Aren't you afraid I'm going to find you in a back alley and beat you up? I'm not. You're not an idiot, Daniel shrugged. Honestly, you and I have nothing to share. You don't like Mary, and she's been trying to get out of this house for a long time. It's only going to make things easier for everyone. Fuck you. Randy made another sluggish attempt to attack Daniel, but the latter had no trouble catching him in a grapple and knocking him to the floor. Randy desperately tried to throw his opponent off him, but Daniel had his knees firmly around his body, preventing him from moving. Let go, you bastard, Randy hissed. Give me your word that you'll leave Mary alone. Otherwise, I'll come here every day, and I'll never let you live, Daniel said grimly. Okay, Randy exhaled heavily and gave up, relaxed and stretched out on the floor. It was clear that his ardor was long gone, and he was fighting more for show. That's good. No bloodshed, Daniel nodded. He got to his feet and held out his hand to Randy, but he snorted, not even trying to help. The conversation was over. Mr. Daniel Smith, Investigator Brown said sternly, looking directly at the young man, so you were the last person to see Randy alive? You talk as if you'd already found his body. Daniel frowned. There's no body, but there's a car that belongs to the missing man, and there's blood on the interior. And the car itself is abandoned at the edge of the woods. Or would you say that's not suspicious? The investigator continued. My fingerprints are there. Daniel did not give in to provocation. The experts are working. Then what questions do you have for me? There are always questions, the investigator smiled predatorily. You're under a pretty serious shadow of a murder charge. Why on earth would that be? Daniel was indignant. Frankly, he was shocked by the news. Everything had been fine a couple of days ago, and now this turn of events. Where could this drunk have gone? Daniel thought, drumming his fingers nervously on the table. Why did you come to me with this particular question? What's the matter? It's not my fault. You know? It is a small town. Everything's out in the open, you can't hide anything. A fight, for instance, Brown said with a hint. Somebody saw you go to Randy's house the other day. Noisy, arguing, fighting. What kind of snitches do you have? Daniel flared up. Exactly. So there's no point in denying it. Tell me what you've been fighting about and where you've taken our Randy. I'm telling you. I didn't do anything, and you have no evidence to make such a serious accusation. I have lawyers, powerful friends. After all, I'm not the last man in this town myself, so if you'd be so kind as to leave the office. We know about your friends, Daniel Smith. Unfortunately for you, Mrs. Sally is away on a visit to the other side of the country and is unaware of your little troubles. The governor's daughter is a strong card, I'll grant you that. She's just not your help right now. So what are you going to do? Hang a murder on me, Daniel said angrily. First, we'll put you in a detention center for investigation, and you, as the prime suspect, will be our guest. Maybe you'll remember something. Give us some useful information. You know, it's better to think in lockup. No distractions, no fuss. But I have a job, a clinic. Do you have any idea what kind of responsibility that is? Daniel got angry. If you're really not involved, this investigation won't take long. You just hired yourself a great deputy, also from our town. I'm sure he'll keep an eye on the hospital. Sven, isn't it? They're keeping an eye on him too, because we know about your long-standing friendship. Daniel was starting to lose his temper. And the worst part was, there was no one to vent his anger on. Helpless again, like some college kid. Gritting his teeth, Daniel muttered, I hope you realize that if your accusations are proven wrong, you will have to apologize. Of course, if the murderer is not you, I will personally admit my incompetence and humbly bow my head in apology. In the meantime, Brown pulled out his handcuffs, placing them defiantly on the table in front of Daniel. There was no need to put them on. The young man wasn't going to resist. But the policeman just seemed to enjoy feeling his power over the moment. I know you couldn't stoop to murder, Mary sobbed. Randy probably did it himself, or got lost in the woods because he was drunk. Mary looked regretfully at Daniel, sitting on the other side of the bars in the detention center. They'd been allowed a short date to socialize, and she couldn't stop crying bitter tears. It's going to be all right. It's not my fault, and they don't have any real evidence, Daniel tried to reassure her. I want to help you, but I don't know how. Just don't do anything dangerous. I don't want you risking your life for that alcoholic. I don't care about Randy. I'm willing to risk everything for you, Mary exhaled. A short period of happiness had convinced Mary that everything could be all right. For the first time in years, she felt wanted, loved, and needed. She practically believed in a miracle. And then the world decided to strike again. I love you, Mary whispered. And I you. Please be careful. Time came the stern voice of the guard. The minutes allowed for the date were over. The policeman led Mary out the door without even a proper goodbye to Daniel. Go back to your cell, the guard whispered. Back in the cell, Daniel shrugged his shoulders. He had realized at once that it was better not to argue with the local warders, so he obeyed their orders without further ado. Did you have a good time? Dr. One of Daniel's cellmates snorted as he returned to his seat. Sort of, Daniel grinned. You don't show off, Razor, the other roommate jumped in. Accidentally or not, Daniel had been put in a cell with some hardened recidivists who didn't mind humiliation out of boredom. If you speak out, we'll have you down in no time, one of the cellmates said threateningly. Let's not get violent, Daniel raised his open palms in front of him. It wasn't easy enough being in the cell, and the danger of the neighborhood made being in the isolation ward a living hell. He was on edge every second, watching the movements of his dangerous cellmates. Pin suddenly stood up from his bunk and then loomed menacingly over Daniel, showing his disdain for the young man. I hate your kind. Clean-cut, educated, never had a clue about life. You think you know everything? I don't. The criminal spat on the floor, almost hitting Daniel's shoes. You mark my words. When the moment comes, you'll wish you were here, he continued. What moment? Daniel asked in a huff. Someone has a huge grudge against you, mate, and he won't forget it. Trust me, he's not an easy man to reach through the bars. With these very fingers, he said, showing his palms. All of them were covered with blue tattoos, reflecting the years of time the hardened criminal had served. Daniel involuntarily shrugged, realizing at last how much danger was hanging over his head. Mary, hi. We need to talk, Mr. Tom, the elderly forester, greeted her. So how do you do? I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. No offense taken, she waved sadly. It's about your ex-husband, Randy. Mary froze like a dumbfounded woman. Had there really been some news that could help Daniel? A stray thought raced through her mind. She clenched her fists, afraid to miss her luck. What's wrong, Mr. Tom? Mary asked in a strained voice. I was out on the old trails the other day, checking out my patch of woods, to keep out poachers and stuff. Excuse me, Mr. Tom, can we get to the point? Mary interrupted, knowing firsthand the older man's talkative nature. Oh, yes, of course. There's an old camp there, an old but solid cabin. Hunters sometimes rest there. As I was walking along, I saw smoke coming from the chimney. I went over to look, and there was Randy, drunk, sitting there with a mountain of empty bottles around him. What a bastard, Mary immediately exclaimed. While he's drinking vodka, Daniel's in jail. What kind of a man is Randy? He's nothing but trouble. And what's more, I've been watching him for a couple of days. I had a feeling in my heart something bad was going on. People coming round. Sometimes they bring Randy a black suv, bring him vodka, food, something to talk about. But from the looks of it, Randy's hiding out there. But for what? Just to set Daniel up. Mr. Tom, sweetheart, can you tell me how to get to this cabin so I can explain it to the police? The forester took out a map, on which he had carefully marked with a pencil the route to the cabin of which he had spoken. That's where he must be staying. Doesn't look out of place. Only these guys come round with presents, and one of them, you can see at once, is a respectable type, in a suit, with money. And the other one, you won't believe it, was wearing a white dressing gown for the first time. Did he forget to take it off out of habit or something else? I didn't realize from a distance. But Mary wasn't listening. Her heart was racing. There was a real opportunity to help Daniel vindicate himself. She knew there had been no murder, but now was the chance to really prove her case. Mr. Tom, if you'll excuse me, I have to run. I've got to get Daniel out of here. That was young. I was so hot myself. I was in a hurry, the forester grumbled good-naturedly as he looked after the woman. Help me out, Mary exhaled, running into the district officer's office. What happened? Raised an eyebrow at the policeman who dealt with crime in their neighborhood. I heard about Randy. They said he was murdered. So the city investigators are looking into it, John shrugged. There's no murder. A goddamn alcoholic sitting at his cabin drinking vodka. And there are some suspicious types visiting him. You're saying it's a setup. The policeman immediately realized what she was getting at. Yeah, sure. They dumped the car the right way and spilled the blood where it needed to be. I don't know, but look at the story they're playing. Mr. Tom said one of them was a doctor. I think maybe they drew blood from his vein and smeared it on the car to make it look like a murder. Isn't that a bit too clever for our village? With doubt stretched the district police officer. So let's go and check it out. You're the authority. We have to find out everything here, Mary shouted. We should call those investigators ourselves. They're on it. John, what if they're all in on this? They must have been bought by these city people. And they found the car right away. And they came to Daniel's house the same day. Usually they drag out the red tape for weeks. But this one was solved in the blink of an eye. There's no such thing as coincidence. Maybe you're right. Thoughtfully rubbed the bridge of his nose. Okay, let's do this. We go there, organize an ambush, and find out everything ourselves. We'll catch the criminals on the spot, so they won't be able to get away with it. How long do we have to sit like this? Mary asked anxiously. What did you think? Like fishing. It's only interesting to hook the fish, and while you're waiting for the catch, you can fall asleep with boredom, John said melancholically. I can't wait. Sit and rest, or are you in a hurry? The policeman grinned. While we're resting here, Daniel's behind bars with the criminals. Anything could happen. I worry about that every day. Don't worry, we'll bail you out. The policeman and Mary settled down not far from the camp, having made themselves a shelter in another hunting lodge, which the forester had also told them about. From here they had a good view of Randy's hiding place, and Mary and John took turns at the binoculars. "What a bastard, he hasn't even come out once," she said angrily. "Is he even still there?" John nodded. "I've seen it a couple of times through the window, and there's smoke coming from the chimney, so it must have been stoked recently." Mary stared into the distance, her heart aching with longing. Every minute of useless waiting separated her from her beloved. At night she cried quietly into her pillow, and during the day she only thought about how to correct this injustice as soon as possible. "Look, someone's coming," Mary whispered, lowering her voice for some reason. "Our clients," John nodded. He grabbed the binoculars and began to watch the black SUV. Rolling slowly, it swerved toward Randy's hideout. "What are we going to do?" Mary whispered. "You're going to stay here. With the radio, you'll be my cover. I'll go in there and talk to the guys, see what's going on. Maybe they'll decide to come clean now that they're caught." "You're going in there alone," Mary sighed fearfully. "That's why you're staying behind to cover. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, call everyone you can," John said seriously. "What if they have guns?" "I don't have a gun hanging from my belt either." When he had finished briefing Mary, the policeman stepped carefully out of the hut and headed straight for the cabin. He walked with a confident gait, as if he were already the master of the situation. Mary could see through the binoculars the arrival of the guests and Randy himself fidgeting. All three were given a skeptical look by City Investigator Brown. "You know, we're no slouch either," he joked. "All right, well done, hero." It was obvious that Brown was not pleased with the initiative of the local authorities. But the criminals had already been caught. There was no way to cover it up. "Did you get a chance to question them?" John nodded. "What was the problem?" "It's simple. Mr. Gregory, the former MP, and his sidekick, the former head doctor, Mr. Matthew, had decided to pull a scam. They've got a grudge against Daniel for some old beef they had, so they thought they'd get back at the lad, frame him for murder." "How?" Brown asked. "They got Randy, Mary's ex-husband, to pretend he was dead. In return, they gave him vodka at the old camp. It just so happened to be stumbled upon by a woodsman who told us all about it. That's the only reason we found the trail." "Why didn't he tell us right away?" "He wanted to see for himself first. Otherwise, I'd be distracting you for nothing. You'll blush later." John's hands were in the air. "In the end, they just wanted to get Daniel settled." Brown raised an eyebrow. "Sure, only the deception was exposed, and the scoundrels are going to get the punishment they deserve. But you're still..." John looked at his colleague. "Where will they go?" Brown dismissed it. "It was a fun wedding," Sven said tiredly as he entered Daniel's office. "Are you suffering?" He grinned. "Of course, you're a beast. You don't let yourself or people rest. Why don't you go on holiday?" "I'll leave tomorrow. I'll try to leave you here alone. By the way, Charlie's on you for the whole holiday, feeding and petting in large quantities." The growing dog was showing his independence, but he didn't argue too much with his master. "Hurry up. At least we'll get some rest from you." Sven rolled his eyes. Daniel got a divorce from Angela as soon as he was released and proposed to Mary. Then he'd had a big country wedding. "By the way, how's Mary's leg doing? Any complications?" "Is it all right?" asked Sven, who had personally obtained a quota for the operation in the city. "Of course. You saw her dancing. Her leg is as good as new. She won't limp again." "Thank you." "It's all thanks to you." Daniel thanked his friend sincerely. "It's nothing. You deserve it," Sven smiled. "You owe me a bargain." "Speaking of which," Daniel said cryptically, the recent news still made his heart flutter and his lips part in a happy smile. Immediately after the wedding, Mary had pulled him aside and gently revealed a positive pregnancy test. "What happened?" Sven looked at his mate in surprise. "I want to invite you to be godfather to Mary and me," Daniel said solemnly. "Oh, no kidding." "Well done." Sven was genuinely happy. "Thank you, it's a great honor. I'll do my best to justify the trust." If Daniel had been told a year ago that he wouldn't want to leave the province, and that he would also head one of the most advanced medical centers here, he wouldn't have believed it. On top of all that, he had a beautiful wife and a real family at last. "Well, we're going to be okay now." "That's right," Daniel exhaled happily and squeezed his eyes shut. "Of course we will. The main thing is that we have loyal friends and loving family, and I can do anything." "What are you two chatting about?" Mary asked, entering her husband's office. "Just about life," Daniel exhaled, admiring his wife. He got up from his desk, walked over to her, and kissed her tenderly on the lips. The widow of the late doctor arrived at the old house, and barely had she gone to the village wedding. Alex had been stuck in traffic for 2 hours. Already half an hour ago, he was supposed to be at the reception organized by the investor on the occasion of his birthday. He'd driven straight from the clinic and hadn't even gone home to change. His wife Stacy called every 10 minutes to remind him not to be late. And he was late. A traffic jam this bad wasn't part of the plan. I don't know what happened out there. The cars stood dead still, shifting a meter every 5 minutes. And then stop again. All the cars behind and front on the side were already considered, and the drivers could be considered familiar. And that car overtook by half a meter. And now it was 1.5 meters behind. Some kind of entertainment, an old man in a Volga in front. Some sticks with red rags on the ends stick out of the trunk. On the left is a girl in an Audi. She talks on the phone all the time and occasionally looks at Alex with interest. On the right, the most desperate or the most brazen occasionally fly by on the side of the road. What's ahead of them is unknown. Alex wouldn't be nervous at all. Well, a traffic jam and a traffic jam. At last one could rest. But he imagined what Stacy would say to him when he got there. If he did. It's the wife calling again. Where are you? I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here, asking about you. You don't realize how important it is for you to be here. I really don't understand the importance. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic jam. Can't or won't. Stacy, I'll be there as soon as I can. Alex dropped the call. He doesn't need this reception. Let the investors talk to the clinic management. Why invite the department heads? What's the joy of celebrating a birthday in a crowd of unfamiliar people? Alex saw this investor once at the clinic, and suddenly he's honored to be invited, and with his wife. He would have preferred to go home, spend a quiet evening, read 2 interesting articles sent to him a month ago. Instead, he was going to some party where he had to keep a straight face and socialize with uninteresting people, and was indecently late. Stacy, unlike her husband, was glad of the invitation. She had rarely been able to attend receptions of this caliber. Was it not so much to look at others as to show herself? She realized that on her own, as a schoolteacher, no one in this high society is not interesting. But she was with her husband. And this husband, damn him to hell, can't get there. The ones who jump on the side of the road go somewhere. Maybe we should try it. Alex drove to the side of the road, skidded along the potholes for 500 meters and again found himself in a traffic jam, now on the side of the road. Further, the curb ended, and it was possible to pass only on the road. And those patiently standing in the lane were in no hurry to let those who liked freebies through. They wanted to cheat fate, so stand there now. And in another half an hour, Alex returned to the lane. A Volga with sticks and red rags loomed ahead. What he left from, he came back to. Irony of fate. Looks like he's only coming to the appointment to pick up his wife. That's fine. It's a shame about the time, though. We're finally getting going. And soon the cause of the jam became clear: a terrible accident. 3 cars and 1 truck. Rescue workers were scrambling around. People were pulled out of the cars. Then the emergency cars, like scrap metal, moved to the side of the road by machinery. 1 lane was freed for traffic. Drivers carefully drove around the crash site. Alex saw the wrecked cars of rescuers and ambulance doctors. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a man sitting on the ground by the truck's wheel with a crazy look, clearly in shock. Alex turned towards the accident. A lifeguard immediately ran up to him. Get back on the road. This is not a circus. I'm a trauma doctor. Oh, well, go ahead then. You're the man for the job. There were 10 victims, all with serious injuries. A guy was badly hurt, his spine was damaged, and a young woman, whom rescuers couldn't get out of the car for a long time. Her 3-year-old daughter, frightened and crying, was examined in an ambulance. Doctors dealt with the heaviest. The others with fractures and injuries were waiting their turn. Alex had been stuck in traffic for 2 hours. He was supposed to be at the reception, organized by the investor on the occasion of his birthday, half an hour ago. He'd driven straight from the clinic and hadn't even gone home to change. His wife Stacy called every 10 minutes, reminding him not to be late. And he was late. A traffic jam this bad wasn't part of his plan. I don't know what happened. The cars stood dead still, shifting a meter every 5 minutes. Alex looked at the surrounding cars and drivers, trying to distract himself. In front was an old man driving a Volga with some sticks with red rags sticking out of its trunk. On the left, a girl in an Audi was constantly talking on the phone and occasionally glanced at Alex with interest. On the right, desperate drivers periodically pulled to the curb. Alex himself wouldn't be particularly nervous, but he imagined what Stacy would tell him when he finally arrived. If he did arrive. His wife called again. "Where are you?" "I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here, asking about you. You don't realize how important it is for you to be here." "I really don't understand the importance. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic jam," Alex answered. "Can't or won't?" Stacy kept up. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Alex said tiredly and dropped the call. He didn't feel like going to this appointment at all. Let the clinic management talk to the investors. Why call ordinary managers? To celebrate someone's birthday in a crowd of unfamiliar people. Alex has only seen this investor once. He would prefer to go home, quietly read interesting articles, rather than go to a party where you have to keep your face and talk to uninteresting people, and even be indecently late. Stacy believed that the power of words could be used to keep students from doing bad things. The main thing is to properly explain what is good and what is bad. Her sincere impulses touched the students, and they agreed not to upset the young teacher, taking a kind of patronage over her. At 13, these idealists were convinced that they knew much more about life than their naive, saintly mentor. The whole class went hiking together, watched new movies, skated or played beach volleyball. Thus, in an atmosphere of mutual illusions, Stacy brought her class to graduation. Apparently, her teaching efforts were not in vain, because after graduation her students did not disappear from her life. They congratulated her on her birthday and New Year, came to share their troubles, or just to chat. Teachers with great experience and merit believed that such trusting relations with students were an indicator of professional unsuitability. Our task is to provide education, and to make friends with students is the height of unprofessionalism. There is not enough mental strength or time for everyone, they said. Most likely they were jealous of Stacy, but for some reason they couldn't admit it. In high school, Stacy met Alex. He was 12 years older than her, a mature and confident man. His son went to this school, and one day his father came to the parent-teacher conference instead of his mom. Alex was attracted to this enthusiastic teacher with an unconventional approach to pedagogy. He divorced his wife 3 years ago and had no contact with her at all. The separation from his son was too painful. They met only occasionally. That day Alex came to the parents' meeting for the first time in his life because his ex-wife suddenly called, threw a tantrum, and demanded that he immediately dropped all his affairs and went to the school to save his son. What to save him from? She didn't explain. Why she didn't go herself, it was clear she was in no condition. Alex realized that most likely nothing terrible had happened, but still went to the school. One should be aware of the events. And suddenly Kieran really needs to save his son, if not from the school, then from his mother. Alex hadn't seen Kieran in a while. We need to talk. He was ready to take Kieran with him, but he was afraid that his ex-wife, left alone, would go crazy. And Vincent, feeling sorry for his mother, refused to move in with his father. Alex was worried, but he didn't think it was possible to put pressure on his son. He was an adult and would figure it out on his own. After the meeting, Alex approached Stacy. He really didn't understand why his ex-wife was so hysterical. AC in physics? A conflict with a classmate isn't a disaster. It's just high school life. Unpleasant, sure, but no reason to declare a rescue mission. Stacy confirms there's no problem. Vince is a wonderful boy, a little withdrawn, but kind and talented, she said. Alex had already realized that all students were wonderful and talented to her. She would even justify a bully and find a lot of positive qualities in him. An amazing girl. There aren't many like her left. Alex always came with flowers, gallant and courteous. Stacy's friend, history teacher Kira, in common parlance Millie, colorfully told how the teachers reacted to her novel. These envious women can only discuss you. For them, teacher and nun are synonymous. You can't have a teaching career if you've got a man. Or rather, you've got the wrong guy. If you'd brought out some loser, that's a yes. And self-sufficient, independent man they will not appreciate, and therefore in your selfless labor. A happy, loved, prosperous woman. What can she teach her children? How will she prepare them for the rigors of life? Millie mocked them. You're overreacting, Stacy countered. Half of our teachers are married. Married ones are there, not happy ones. How would you know? Millie countered. Why do they make you feel bad about yourself? Why don't they just be happy for you? Tell me. If I was going to marry a good man, what would you say? I'd wish him happiness, Stacy replied sincerely. Millie was right, none of her co-workers were happy for Stacy. They were just gloating and wondering when Alex would leave her. You don't have to get married, Stacy said. You do. Don't give them anything to gloat about. There's no turning back. Stacy was in love. Alex was so serious, so thorough. He was even courting like he had a plan. It was all clearly laid out. The fact that Alex was married didn't bother Stacy. It was strange if a man had never been married by the time he was 40. What confused her was that he never said a word about his ex-wife. So many years together, they had a teenage son, and it was as if Alex had erased her from his memory. What had happened between them? Why had they divorced? Stacy wondered. Alex wouldn't tell her, just dismissed it. She's not in our lives anymore. I wouldn't think about her at all. But there's a son. I've helped him, and I'll continue to help him. Don't worry, we'll be fine. And indeed, everything was fine. They arranged a small wedding trip, rented a house for a week on the coast in Miami. Sun, sea, and no one but the two of them. They just didn't need anyone. Stacy looked at her husband, and only one thought was racing through her mind. How do I love you? How is it that of all the men on earth, I got the best one? She was ready to stare into his gray, most beautiful eyes in the world all day long. No one had ever been so happy. Stacy began to doubt her mental faculties, for she could think of nothing but her husband. Only love and happiness. In all the years that followed, when longing struck, Stacy remembered that week of boundless happiness on the ocean, and it warmed her heart. She longed to return to that place and experience the same feelings again, to remember what it was like to be truly happy. 7 years of life together flew by unnoticed. Love, of course, did not go away, but it became ordinary, not causing the same excitement. When Alex didn't show up for that important appointment at the clinic, Stacy took offense. He'd left her alone among strangers. No one cared about her. Her co-workers tried not to leave her alone, but everyone was vapid. Stacy felt superfluous. When someone looked at her, she felt like she was being pitied, perplexed as to who she was and what she was doing here. She was still hoping Alex would come. When he stopped answering his cell phone, Stacy hailed a cab and headed home. She'd had enough of this embarrassment. At home, she stood in front of the mirror. A tall, slender woman in an elegant dress, with a beautiful, intelligent face, looked back at her. She felt sorry for this beauty, she cried. She had been preparing so much, dreaming that everyone would appreciate their beautiful couple, would say compliments, and Alex would be proud of his wife. Instead of compliments, indifference. Instead of a pleasant evening, longing and loneliness. Stacy cried until midnight, then got angry. Then she calmed down, deciding that she shouldn't get worked up. Alex was about to come and explain everything. He did come, but Stacy waited in vain. No explanation or apology followed. Alex didn't even ask how the evening had gone. Either he didn't remember the reception or he thought it was nothing. Stacy couldn't take it anymore, walked over to her husband, snatched the magazine from his hands, threw it on the floor, and asked, looking into his surprised eyes, "Where did you go yesterday? Aren't you interested in how I had fun? You left me alone and now you won't even explain." "Stacy, I'm tired," Alex replied, picking up the magazine from the floor and continuing to read it. And that was it. No more explanations followed. That's how indifferent it was, just impenetrable. How badly it made my soul feel. What should I do to make him come out of his shell and show some feelings? Change him, or what? Die, maybe? I wonder if he'll notice. Probably just happy to be distracted from work again. Another sleepless night and desperate loneliness in the morning. This morning was neither good nor wise. At any rate, neither were the evenings. Not a single wise thought came during the night. What to do with a personal life that was going downhill? Stacy decided to take the tried and true route. She should go to Millie's. She always had a way of setting things right. Millie's loyal friend was a big fan of Alex, thought Stacy was complaining about her fat. There are no husbands like her anymore, and you can tell from experience. Millie had been married twice over the years and considered herself an expert on husbands, both her own and other people's. Her first husband was an artist, a musician, a poet, 3 in 1. Life with him was a total celebration, a wrench in the air. Millie said that mostly in her head he was fun and unpredictable. An unrecognized talent, an unaccomplished genius. A bohemian, a boy who hadn't grown up. Husbands are like trained animals in the circus, Millie said. He seems to be trained, but it's not clear what to expect from him. And we lived in starvation from lack of money. Millie went to the other extreme. Her second husband was a boring middle-class bureaucrat. Not young, unattractive, but with means and connections. The presence of a young and beautiful wife sharply raised his authority in the eyes of colleagues. So he spared no expense on his doll. In addition, his wife a schoolteacher, somehow out of status, so now Millie taught at the university. All would be nothing, but tolerate his boring Millie long could not. She got divorced and got a good apartment in the city center from a miser as a payoff. Now she was in full chocolate and in the active search for the next husband. Millie sincerely thought that her friend was lucky. Alex is handsome, smart, and a great doctor. Not boring, doesn't drink, doesn't cheat. What more do you need? She'd never had a love like Stacy's before. All she could do was dream and envy. Stacy showed up looking as gloomy as a cloud with tears in her eyes. "Why don't you have a quiet life?" Millie asked. "He doesn't notice me at all. If I disappear, he'll only realize when he can't find supper. And supper isn't always at home, so he won't find it right away. He doesn't care about me at all. Remember when I went to college, I consulted with him. I couldn't make up my mind. A month ago, he asked me how I was doing in school." "Stacy, are you exaggerating? I don't get the image of Alex in my head. It's not about him. He's a reasonable man. Yeah, he's very busy with work, but that's good. Who's so obsessed with work that they forget their wife at appointments? You think he's got a woman?" "No, he doesn't. But maybe it would be better. At least it would be clearer. You, girlfriend, don't take it out on your husband. He's tired, he'll come to his senses, and everything will be fine. For a man like your Alex, you'll have to look harder." "What man?" Stacy was outraged. "I'll throw him out, take him to the woods and leave him there." "I'm sorry to hear that," Millie grinned. "Stacy, my friend, where are you?" "I don't need this. What are you doing? If you throw him out, they'll pick him up. Look, I really don't understand what's wrong with you. There's no such thing as crazy love for life. You've had it. But I haven't. 2 husbands, and not one heavenly love. You're a lucky girl. Don't make God angry." "Maybe you're right." Stacy sighed. "What's the matter? I'm coming at you again with my melancholy." "You're welcome. I'm always at your service." A few days later, all the news programs started with breaking news from Alaska. Another earthquake had struck there. The country watched with bated breath the statistics of dead and wounded. Rescuers and doctors from all over the country flew to Alaska. Alex was going to be part of one of the teams. "Stacy, you have to understand, I can't not go, because I'm needed there now," he said. "Don't worry, I'll be home in a week." Stacy watched the news like a bulletin from the front. One day she saw Alex in a story about doctors. Worried, she called him. He answered. Her heart ached. She chased away the dark thoughts. What could happen? He doesn't go into the rubble. He helps those who have already been harassed. Suddenly there was a new jolt. More dead and wounded. Alex didn't call for 2 days. He didn't answer the phone. Finally a call. "No, it's not Alex. It's an unfamiliar number." "Yeah, I'm listening," Stacy answered. "Stacy? It's for you. Your husband Alex was killed in Anchorage during a debris removal in the village of New Life. I'm so sorry for your loss. We're covering all transportation costs." What's not covered? What transportation? Are they talking about Alex? What do you mean, dead? Is everyone out of their minds? Stacy dialed Alex's number. He wasn't answering for some reason. She heard a ringing in her ears. Then there was a rumbling sound of someone banging on the door. She got up, went to the door, stood looking at it, not understanding how to open it. Something unpleasant had been said to her. She couldn't remember what. Who was knocking like that? There's a bell, isn't there? Stacy opened the door. Behind her stood Alex and fellow doctors from the clinic. What's up? Are they here? It's not Alex's birthday, she said absently. Suddenly it was clear in her head, dead. Condolences. Stacy didn't remember anything else. She woke up when the coffin was lowered into the grave, screaming, rushing in. She was held, thrashing in someone's arms and screaming. Then the memory lapsed again. Like Millie and Vince were saying something, feeding her something. When she came to, she was surprised she was alive. No, not surprised. I was upset. Why alive? Millie, like a guardian angel, was always there to keep Stacy from falling into the abyss. She calmed her down, persuaded her, drew prospects, pushed her into action. In short, after a couple months, Stacy could be talked to without fear of going crazy. To be honest, Millie hadn't expected Stacy to be so out of it. I get it, a loved one had died, but to throw herself so out of her life, Millie looked after Stacy herself. Gradually, she came to her senses, went back to her normal life. It was depressing, but it was manageable. The "I can't live without him" thoughts were gone. At least she tried. Things gradually settled down. Stacy shuddered at night, cried. Sometimes she even forgot to grieve during the day. Then she remembered, but she didn't grieve as much. It was almost 6 months after Alex's death. Then one day Millie suddenly asked, "Stacy, have you applied for an inheritance?" "What application? Why?" "Well, your husband had assets like this apartment. It's his apartment, by the way. Here. And he has a son, an heir. The ex-wife can't claim, but the son can. I'm guessing you and Vince are going to have to share the apartment. And if he doesn't inherit, there's nothing to split. So get the deed to a notary tomorrow." That doesn't make any sense. It hadn't occurred to Stacy that she'd have to share the apartment she'd lived in for so many years, used to thinking of it as hers. It was only now, after Millie's words, that she realized she wasn't. She's a resident. She can't be kicked out, but it's not her apartment. The notary was a young girl with a stern look, and not at all respectable hair, a ponytail on top of her head. She looked at the documents, accepted Stacy's application, and explained thoroughly that she would inherit half of the apartment, half of the car, and half of the dacha by law. She advised her to negotiate with the second heir, Vince, for the child. How do we divide it all up? Who gets the car? Who gets the cottage? Who gets the apartment? Stacy was prepared to give up the car and the summer house if they'd let her stay in the apartment. She just didn't have anywhere else to live. She knew it wasn't equal. Vince probably wouldn't mind, but his mother was still there. Some strange notice came in about land and property tax arrears. Stacy thought at first it was for the cottage and the apartment. But why in her name? The all-knowing Millie advised her to go to the registry and find out what was going on. Oh, that counselor. I'm having second thoughts. That's not good, Stacy sighed. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex's ex-wife was up to something. But signing the property over to me so I don't have to pay taxes. That's stupid, even for her. And last year's taxes. Maybe Alex signed something over to me. We didn't buy anything. Everything we own was bought a long time ago. The registry gave Stacy a deed to a 53-square-foot lot and house in Brooklyn Village. Brooklyn who? What house? I've got an apartment to take care of. The only thing missing was the house. She was upset. Life was getting a little too stressful. Unable to understand, Stacy called Alex's friend and colleague Joshua. But Joshua, did Alex say something to you about a house in the country? You mean Brooklyn? It's a nice cabin. I loved it. Janie and I stayed there for a month last year. Alex said he bought it for the future, and he's going to build it into a cottage and live there when he retires. Why didn't I know about this? And why did he put it in my name? I can understand that. He's older than you. Probably wanted you to have something of your own in case something happened to him. He didn't tell you because he didn't have to. He wanted to build a palace for the princess first, and then bring the princess to the palace. Who knew he wouldn't make it in time? Oh, I'm sorry. What are we going to do with this palace now? Whatever you want. But I wouldn't sell it if I were you. It's a wonderful place. You should go and see it. The doorbell rang. Stacy said a quick goodbye to Joshua and went to answer it. Standing outside the door was an inebriated woman with permanently dyed red hair. The woman shook her red curls. Without waiting for an invitation, she entered the apartment and walked through the rooms. "Who are you?" Stacy asked. "Me. My son Vince owns this apartment. I want to live with my son. You don't have kids, you don't understand. I'm going to live with my son." "But Vince only owns half of the apartment, and the other half is mine," Stacy argued. "Great. We'll live together. I don't mind roommates. How are we going to divide up the rooms?" "Look, you can't be serious. We can't live in the same apartment." "I don't want to." "Well, if you don't leave, we'll have to. Think about it. I'll bring my stuff the day after tomorrow. Bye." "What do we do now? What do you do in a situation like this?" "You run to a friend." So Stacy went to Millie's. She called Vince, asked him to come over. I wanted to know if the idea of living together was his mom's fantasy or their decision. Vince wasn't reassured. His mother's decision was Alex's revenge, albeit belated, to get Stacy out of the apartment. Vince had urged his mother, offered her options. But she wouldn't listen. She didn't want the apartment so much as she wanted to show her power. She's not going to give up. She's going to ruin her life any way she can. Vince left. Her friends were left to grieve. "Why don't you buy half the apartment off her?" "If it's not enough money, I'll add to it," Millie suggested. "I'm afraid she won't sell. It's important to her to humiliate me. She's dreaming about how she's going to humiliate me, ruin my life. She won't take any money for that kind of pleasure." Vince knows it's impossible to live like this, but he can't do anything about it. She's got this idea to move in with me. It's fun and revenge for her miserable life. You should have seen her. She has a goal to kill me. That's the kind of fun she'd like to have. Listen, is this crazy woman seriously going to live with the widow of her ex-husband? Millie was horrified. Apparently so. Moving in with me, she will live for now, but then it will still need something to do with the apartment to decide to sell, to divide. Well, you've been on the prowl, and I've been running around. No, friend, I'm not my enemy. I don't want to be without you. Who do you want to be with? Living with that crazy woman in the same apartment. I'm not seriously considering it myself, Stacy said. I have an unfinished palace. I'm going to go check it out. Where? The country? It's in the middle of nowhere. No, it's not. I looked. It's only 200 kilometers away. I need to recover. I'll go, then I'll wake up and decide how to live my life. Millie, I feel like I need this. If I don't try to start over, I'm gonna die. I don't know. Maybe it will work, Millie said doubtfully. It seemed like a decision had been made. But it was so scary to change her established, stable life for the unknown prospect of living in a village Stacy had never been to. But then some builders showed up, measuring the height of the opening and asking which walls were load-bearing. Clearly, they were doing a huge renovation. Are you registered here? The woman asked. Well, live here. No one is forcing you out. We have a reservation. Stacy quickly put her things in her bag and rushed to the bus station. Didn't wait for the red-headed vigilante to show up. Enough with the nerves. Though in the queue at the ticket office, she suddenly remembered that she had a car. She was kicked out of her apartment, so at least she could have her car. I didn't doubt that they would track her car. They wouldn't deny themselves such a pleasure. But for now, we can drive to the village. Where am I going? What for? How will I live? I'll figure it out when I get there. Strange village. Not a lantern, not a light. The time is 21:00, and the village is dead. Either they're asleep or there's no light. Where do we go from here? Where's the heir to the estate? Yeah, there's people here. Apparently the car is a novelty around here. Crawled out to have a look. At least they'll tell us where to go. They did. But they looked warily what kind of a lady brought here at night. And there's really no light. There's probably a candle somewhere, but how do you find it around here? Stacy shined the flashlight on her phone. She found the bed and went to sleep. I'll figure it out tomorrow. She couldn't sleep with hunger. She broke all the cookies she'd taken on the road. There was nothing else to sleep on. Stacy didn't immediately realize where she was. Oh yes, the village. No lights, but there was a manor. I'd have to look around. I'm also very hungry. Is there a store here? Stacy's house was impressive. Nice furniture, big windows, curtains, dishes, fridge, TV, everything. You could tell Alex really wanted to live here. Everything's been thought out and arranged with love. He didn't tell her anything, but he made it look like he'd consulted her. Stacy wouldn't change a thing about this house. She loved it. The house was neglected and unkept, but that was fixable. Stacy stepped out onto the porch. It's beautiful. It's like a garden. Lilacs in bloom, pink apple trees, some shrubs she didn't know the names of. Unsupervised raspberries grow all over the plot. Under the apple trees in a thicket of burdock stands a table. A swing hanging from a branch. The ropes are almost rotten. Behind the house, impassable cherry tree stands a solid white wall. Then I'll have to climb the plot to see what else grows here. But now it's not about flowers and berries. I have to find a store and buy groceries. Because I'm so hungry I feel dizzy. There was salt, sugar, macaroni, a pack of tea, and a bottle of sunflower oil in the refrigerator, which was turned off. Probably hidden from the mice. Stacy took out the groceries, turned on the refrigerator, and went looking for the store. A woman in her 60s looked at her curiously from behind a neighboring fence. "Daughter, who do you think you are?" The house was empty. "Today I saw someone walking around the yard. The owner Alex is here, a doctor from the city. Are you his wife?" She called out. Widow Stacy said the word aloud for the first time. It was sharp, harsh, hopeless. It divided life into before and after. "Oh, I'm sorry, you old fool. I'm minding my own business," the woman said. "My name is Esmeralda, Aunt Esme, and what's yours?" "Stacy. Can you tell me where your store is?" "It's right down the street. It's right downtown. It's got the store, the school, the administration. You'll have to come and see me if you need anything." "Thank you, Aunt Esmeralda." Stacy walked down the street, looking around the village. It was interesting and completely different from her idea of rural life. Once upon a time, while still in college, she had traveled to visit her friend Maggie. It had been her first and only experience of village life. Since then, Stacy was sure that the countryside was dusty streets with lush grass, old houses and vegetable gardens with potatoes and cucumbers. And certainly no decorations in the form of flowers and ornamental bushes. A village is poverty, lack of amenities, and hard work. It's no place for flowers. Whether that village was in the middle of nowhere, or whether things had changed dramatically over time. But now Stacy was pleasantly surprised. In Pokrovka there were good houses. In front of each yard there was a well-tended front garden. Even the streets were not gray and dusty, but green, with flowering trees and bushes. The appearance of a new person in the village was an event. As they walked toward the store, curious eyes peered from behind every fence. 15 times Stacy said hello and explained who she was. Vigilance in the village was at an all-time high. No one passed unnoticed. Somehow the rumors got to the store before Stacy did. 10 people came to see the town girl. The store was full. Nobody bought anything. That's not why they came. They waited, wondering why she'd come and how long she could hold out. They're not evil people, but they're wary of anything new. They know their own people inside and out. It's clear what to expect from whom. This one will give his shirt off his back, the same spender. This one's eager to help. This one's a slacker. But they're all family members. And here's someone who's arrived. They say she's young and beautiful. That's a problem too. There are only 3 single men in the village. We don't have enough. And there's competition. They looked at Stacy frankly and appraisingly. They were careful to ask questions. "You're beautiful. Are you coming here for a long time or just for a week?" "No, I'm not staying for a week. I don't know how long, though." "What are you going to do?" You must be some kind of manager, right? Or a designer. You don't know how to work with your hands in the city. Yeah, I'm not much of a teacher. That's good. We have a big school. We need teachers. But it's hard to live in the countryside. In winter it gets so snowy you can't leave the house. At least we have gas, so we don't have to heat the stoves. And you can't live without a vegetable garden. And they don't bring vegetables here. Aunt Kate didn't scare the man who attacked Stacy. The sales clerk did. I don't carry vegetables. You're not going to buy them. If I have to, I will. No way. Who eats these store-bought vegetables? Can't we share cucumbers and tomatoes? You, daughter, come to my place. I still have some potatoes and carrots left, and I'll give them to you. Thank you. Ladies, are you going to buy anything? If not, go with God. It's like a social club in here. Stacy picked up some groceries. It's a little heavy. We need a bucket, a mop, dishwashing detergent, window cleaner, and a few other little things. I can't carry everything. Are you going to clean up? The salesgirl asked. Well, yes. The house has been closed since last summer. The dirt has accumulated. Let's do it this way. You take what you need now. I'll bring the rest of the stuff along with all the cleaning supplies in a couple hours. My husband's coming home for lunch, so we'll load everything up. And after work, I'll come and help. You're going to be cleaning this house for a week. My name's Digit, by the way. Yeah, that's a little awkward. Come on, I'm curious about you. I'm curious about what kind of bird you are. Let's get to know each other. Oh, I'm Stacy. You don't have to tell me. The whole village knows. Stacy came out of the store, looked around. Here's the school. You can see the kids running around in the yard. It's either gym class or practice or something. I should stop by and see what jobs they have. See if I really have to stay here. So where do we start our new life? Should we make some food? No, sandwich and tea first, then cooking. You're going to choke on your own saliva. After the sandwich, Stacy thought things were looking good. Life was getting better. Now, Digit's bringing in some household chemicals. The first thing to do is clean the windows to get some sunshine and shine. Stacy looked around the house. The gray furniture, the dull windows, the dusty curtains. If everything was washed, it would be cozy. Where's Digit? I can't wait. Digit arrived, as promised, with a young man. A handsome, smiling blonde. Maybe not a fiancé, he was interested, looking interested, clearly trying to please Digit. His name was Alex. Okay, we're off. Alex has to go to work. Digit pushed Alex towards the door. I'll pick up Millie from the garden tonight and come over. What Millie? Stacy didn't understand, but Digit was already running to the car. Millie turned out to be a little red-haired girl named Alice, Digit's daughter. The work went faster with the helpers, and in the course of the evening they had cleaned most of the house. There were still some little things left to do. Tired, but encouraged by the result, sat down to drink tea. But Millie didn't make it to tea, she fell asleep. Digit, who's Alex? They say there are only 3 single men here. One of the 3 was killed, Stacy asked. You should have seen those bachelors, laughed Digit. The most eligible one is Uncle Vincent. He's about 60 years old. You're not going to get anything. He's been courting your neighbor Aunt Esmeralda for about 30 of his 60 years. For as long as I can remember, he's been doing it all his life. He can't make up his mind to propose. And the second bachelor doesn't get a second look from even the most stale 40-year-olds. Nick went to school in the big city. They say he's a computer genius, works from home, lives with his mom, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't talk to anyone. His mom said he was married. The village doesn't believe it. Someone thinks he is abnormal, but everyone agreed he is unfit for socializing, much less marriage. The headmaster didn't mind. It's a good thing, but impossible. In the school for several years did not work gymnasium. There was no money for repairs. The hall is almost emergency. Physical education lessons were held outside, running and soccer in summer, skiing in winter. Then Kiran, the athlete's name, disappeared from the village for a while. Then he came back with a decision to finance the renovation of the gym and a coaching position. That's when it turned out that Kiran, a 3-time national boxing champion, lives in their village. True, he hasn't performed for a long time. He refused to participate in the World Championship. And why no one knows how he ended up in this village is also a mystery. But the locals were sure that there was a woman involved. His daughter was also not candid with anyone, seriously engaged in boxing. Kiran took her to district and regional competitions. Our girls, of course, became animated, poked fun at him and so, but to no avail. He's kind of withdrawn and unsociable. It's like he and his daughter don't need anyone at all. He's only friends with Andrew. But that's how we call the school principal. His real name is Alexander Sergeyevich Voloshin. As bachelors, everything is clear. But where did you get your Alex? Or is he married? Stacy asked. No way. It's too expensive to get involved with married people here, said Digit. We've had a couple of stories like that around here. They didn't end well. Alex is from a neighboring village not far from here. It was a big village with a big school. Kids from neighboring villages went to school here. The school bus brought those who lived close by. The children from the distant villages lived in a boarding school. Digit and Alex had known each other since they were in the 1st grade. As Alex told Alex later, he fell in love with Digit in the 4th grade. Digit was a girl with a lot of wind. She liked one boy or the other. It wasn't until her senior year of high school that she noticed Alex. But what a love it was, a real, youthful love. For life, of course. When it was impossible to breathe without each other, they drew a calendar and crossed off the days until their 18th birthday, when they could get married. Digit's parents weren't against her relationship with Alex, but thought it was a little early to go into the army. Then fine. Digit enrolled in Lyceum. Alex went into the army. In the city, Digit was surrounded by new life, impressions, acquaintances, new love. Digit became pregnant, and the future father suddenly disappeared, not appreciating the happiness that happened. Digit cried and went back to her mother. She cried too and said the usual "I told you so." She hugged her wayward daughter and began to prepare for the birth of the baby. Digit avoided Alex. She was ashamed to look him in the eye, but at night she cried, pitying her first love. That was it. Her love life was over. She would have no love, no family. One joy, red-haired Alice, her mother's happiness. Alex couldn't get over his Digit, tried to live without her, but it didn't work. You know, Stacy, he says he can't live without me. We need to be together. After all, we've lost so much time, said Digit, relaying her friend's words. I don't believe it. How can you forgive betrayal? I chose my destiny. I'm fine, and I don't need anyone. And he just keeps coming and coming. Everything's fine. My eyes are wet, replied Digit. She chose her fate. Ask your fate if she doesn't like your choices. You've been given a chance to get it all back, to be happy. So grab it. Why are you showing off your pride? Stacy said. I can't get anything back. Not a chance. Oh, Stacy, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting here complaining. Silly me. Digit, if you love me, don't be stupid. Now, you've made your mistakes. Don't make another one. You'll never forgive yourself. Oh, look, there's plenty of time. Digit picked up a sleepy Alice. Oh, my darling. It's a shame to wake her up, but she's a big girl. Not Nika. Okay, bye. I'll see you tomorrow. Digit. Thanks for your help. It's a lot of work. Don't kid yourself. For a couple more days, Stacy tidied up and shined. The house was clean, cozy, lived in. It's beautiful. If she could just get the grounds sorted out, it would be a manor house. But Stacy couldn't tackle the grounds alone. She'd need a lot of muscle. All right, we'll do it slowly. Sitting at home all day was getting a bit boring. Stacy decided it was time to go out, at least to school. Stacy had imagined the headmaster of the village school to be old, fat, with glasses, shortness of breath, and the tired look of a troubled man. But he turned out to be young and energetic. When Andrew learned that a certified, experienced Russian teacher had come to visit him, he was overjoyed. Stacy, you have no idea how we work here, he said. I am a math teacher, and I also teach physics. A chemist teaches biology, geography, and a history teacher teaches Russian. You understand what level of knowledge? The only foreign language we have is German. And there are no other teachers. We study in 2 shifts. Not because there are too many students, not because there's not enough space, but because there aren't enough teachers. Come on, I'll show you the school. Andrew talked about the school only in the superlative. He was proud. Stacy hadn't expected that a school in the countryside could be as well equipped as any city school. The chemistry lab, the computer lab, the language class, everything was top-notch. Maybe the repairs are simpler, but the atmosphere is home-like. It's cozy, Stacy said in the gym. A boxing ring was set up in the far corner. Students crowded around it. From the excitement and cheers, something very interesting was going on. Stacy didn't understand anything about boxing, thinking it was a martial art. What kind of sport is it where they hit each other over the head all the time? Andrew walked toward the ring. Stacy preferred to watch from a distance. She can't even watch it on TV, much less live. In the ring, the fight was over and the athletes took off their helmets. Stacy was amazed to see that it was a girl waving her fists. Short, frail, pretty, about 15 years old. The coach came up to her. Tall, strong, with powerful arms, he hugged the girl, said something, and she nodded and agreed. Kieran. The principal waved his hand at the coach. "Come here, Alex, I have a training session." "Your training will wait," said Andrew. "Go," I said. But he addressed Kieran by his first name in front of the students. That's fine if they're friends, but there are professional ethics. After all, a blow to the head doesn't go unnoticed. Stacy, the principal, addressed the new teacher. "This is Kieran, the coach. He's got all the boys from the village here. He's got the little ones and the ones who've left school. Kieran, Stacy will be teaching Russian, I hope." "Hello," said the coach. Up close, he looked huge. He looked at me with a frown, not at all friendly. He did not care about his new colleague, about the Russian language. A rude bore. At least he pretended it was nice to meet you. I'm surprised his children aren't afraid of him. A girl who had just fought in the ring approached them. "This is Joshua," Andrew smiled, "our pride, a champion of the district and winner of regional competitions. Dad says she's very capable. She belongs in big sports." "That's my daughter," Kieran muttered. "I'm sorry, it's probably none of my business. But aren't you afraid for your daughter?" "It's not a woman's sport," said Stacy. "It's none of your business," said the coach. "Okay, that's it. We're done talking. Time to go. Andrew, thanks for the tour. I'll bring the documents tomorrow. Bye." Stacy walked towards the exit of the gym. She heard the principal quietly reprimanding Kieran. "Are you out of your mind? What do you want? Bear horny. You're not mad at Daddy?" Stacy caught up with the boxer girl. He promised with his boxers. He forgot how to talk to women. "How are you guys settling in here? Do you want me to help you?" "I'm afraid Daddy would mind." "No, he won't. He's not mean, he's just unhappy. He needs to come out of his shell and socialize. He doesn't want to. He's not here either. Let's be friends. And Dad, I'm sorry, I know he's in his own words. His conscience is killing him. He'll apologize tomorrow." "Okay, we'll see. Hey Joshua, come by if you get bored." She's such a sweet girl. And she loves her daddy, Stacy thought. I wonder why she called him miserable. Something terrible must have happened. If a person is so closed in on himself, shut off from everyone with his ostentatious indifference and deliberate rudeness. Stacy liked the school and Principal Andrew. She decided she would be comfortable in her new job. One unpleasant person doesn't make the weather, and she's not interested in boxing. So Coach Kieran could be ignored, communication minimized. She was starting a new life, excited about the changes that were coming. No one would be able to throw her off her joyous mood. Not even someone as unpleasant as Kieran. Stacy caught herself thinking that whatever she was thinking about was being lumped in with that coach. That was just what was missing. What did she care about him? Stacy brought her diploma and employment history to school, wrote her application, and was hired to Andrew's outright glee. Too bad it's the end of the school year. But starting in September, everything will go according to plan. And now there is time to assess the equipment of the classroom, something to add, correct, prepare a curriculum. Joshua often came in, chatting and helping. Although Stacy had vowed not to talk to Kieran, she had to see him. He looked for and found her in the Russian language room after training. By the way, for the scene of acquaintance, he, as Joshua said, apologized. Communication was very low-key, hello, goodbye, how are you? Stacy finally got to work on the property. It took a long time to gather her courage, telling herself that it was no big deal, that other people could handle it. In full uniform, gloves, galoshes, with a shovel and hacksaw, went to war on cherry bushes up to 1/2 meter high. I dug, but no way they have roots, to the center of the earth, or what, grow to the center of the earth. I was digging something out, sawing something. I got tired, sat down under the apple tree, and got upset. There's enough to saw or not to saw for the whole summer. So tired, so frustrated. Evie caught her. Stacy, you can't do this. It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting. I'll tell my dad, he can help. No, that's not a good idea. No, it's not a bad idea. It's vacation time. School kids don't go to practice, only adults. That's 3 times a week. He made borscht yesterday out of idleness. Soon he'll start cross-stitching. He'd better do his niece more good by virtue of his great stature. The next day, Kieran came. Stacy felt so embarrassed. He'd think she was the sort of girl who'd look for an excuse to lure him into the house. Every single woman in the village tried that. I don't want anything, she said. I didn't ask for it. I can manage on my own. She thought Kieran grinned. That's a waste, Stacy thought. The awkwardness was gone. So angry, he grinned. You'll only be needed as a tractor, she jerked her chin and pointed with a royal gesture. The shovel is over there. Kieran was visible from the window first. She pretended not to be at all interested in what he was doing there, but she tried to peek discreetly. No sympathy for this man with a nasty temper, of course. But to say he wasn't handsome would be a sin against the truth. Then Kieran moved to another corner. You couldn't see him from the window. Stacy fiddled around. No, she couldn't see him. After about 3 hours, Stacy thought she was being indecent. He's working hard, and she didn't even offer him water. She took the bottle, walked behind the house, and was stunned to see there were no bushes. 5 gorgeous cherry trees along the fence, some bushes. Just a delight. Kieran was tired and asked for water to wash his face. Stacy brought a bucket of water. Kieran took off his t-shirt and splashed in the bucket. Stacy didn't look, but her eyes somehow squinted in that direction. Digit came through the wicket. Wow, she whispered. What's with the mating games? Why, it's the season, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? What are you talking about? Stacy was outraged. He was sent to me with the idea of making friends with you two. He's worried about his daddy. I'd be worried too if I were you. You're a good daddy, but he's no good for you, smirked Digit. He's no good for friendship. Only for love. Digit, stop mocking me. What are you here for? If you're visiting, shall we go inside? No, Stacy, I'm not visiting. I'm here to formally invite you to the wedding. Oh, you've really made up your mind, haven't you? You've brainwashed me so much I realize there's no more time to waste. The wedding's in a month. Of course, I could have brought the invitations later. But I'm so excited, I wanted to share it with someone. Digit turned to Kieran. Kieran. Can you hear me? I'm inviting you to the wedding. Why him? Stacy whispered so Kieran wouldn't hear. You don't know him at all. It's a whim of mine. I invite whoever I want. Digit waved her hand. Well, I'm off. The groom's waiting. Digit left. Kieran sat on the porch and Stacy didn't know what to do next. She was grateful, of course. Maybe she should take him out to dinner. She envisioned lunch, sitting across from each other, chewing and not saying a word. It's like a romantic date. If she didn't think of something now, he'd leave. Isn't that what she dreamed of? And now what? You're looking for a reason to delay. What, did you like him or inspire him? You want to get married? Yes, I did. I can't hide it. Not everyone would go to a woman who shows her disdain to uproot a cherry tree. Besides, he's so cute. Stacy hadn't thought of what to say yet, but Kieran had already put on his shirt and was about to leave. Evie saved the situation. She flew into the courtyard and gabbled. Oh, Daddy, I'm glad you're still here. Let's take Stacy to dinner. Stacy, you have no idea how good a cook he is. He also plays the guitar. What, at the same time? Stacy grinned. No, alternating. So, is it settled? Have you and your dad agreed on this proposal? Well, I don't mind, Kieran cut in. That's it. It's settled. We'll see you tonight. They left, and Stacy was surprised. Wow, this is all working out so well. I didn't have to make the first move myself. Kieran and Evie were walking home and he was singing. You're a clever and beautiful girl, but I think it's time you were whipped. Dad, you weren't faking it, were you? I see you like Stacy, don't you? What would you do without me? Thank you. Thank you. You'd be running around in circles for another year. It's too late for a whipping. 10 years too late, Kieran grinned. Stacy was going out, pulling out almost her entire closet to find an outfit that wasn't too flashy. He'd think she'd dressed up for him. It's boring. It's unfashionable. Here's a light-colored sundress with little flowers. Modest, but tasteful. God, if someone told me that I would dress up and be nervous before a meeting with a former athlete, desirable, I would spit in his face. That's how fate turned, Stacy thought as she dressed up and worried. So she got dressed up and went out. And then Aunt Esmeralda peeked out from behind the fence. In this village you can't go anywhere without supervision. Well, where are you dressed up? She asked. He's a good man, he's doing the right thing. Stacy realized that the village was already aware of their affair and was counting when the wedding was to take place. It's understandable to be bored and want to be colorful, but not to this extent, she thought. Though let them count, maybe it will come in handy. Dinner had been excellent. I couldn't believe Kieran had made it. How could she not? There's no restaurants here you can't order in. Evie was radiant, talking only about Daddy, how wonderful he was and what a sporting career he'd had. The girl really wanted Daddy to be happy. She remembered Mommy, remembered what love was like. But Mom is gone. She couldn't let her daddy live his life alone. She really liked Stacy. And she noticed that Stacy was looking at Daddy with interest. Evie's goal was to get them together. And if a child is up to something, parents are powerless. Kieran and Stacy had another fight. Everything was fine, talking, joking. Turns out Kieran isn't a letter at all. He's a very nice person. Stacy, who put you up to this? She's been going on about boxing not being a sport for girls. It's like stepping on a sore spot. For years, Kieran's been instilling in his daughter a fighter's character. Almost raised a champion. Now some inner-city franchise teacher who knows nothing about professional sports says his daughter should give up boxing. Yes, they embroider cross-stitch, but she can stand up for herself, resented Kieran. If someone hurts you, you will cry, but she will fight back. She'll grow up to be a strong sportswoman. Maybe it's my ambition. But I want my daughter to be a champion. If you had kids, you'd understand. He was hurt. This woman doesn't know anything, but her words hurt. He finally liked a man, but it was like they were from different universes. They couldn't understand each other. Stacy walked home. Evie caught up with her. Evie, go home. I'm sorry I hurt your daddy again. There's something I want to tell you. I think it's time. Kieran and Kira were a nationally known couple. He was a Russian champion, a brutal macho, virile and strong. She was a slim and delicate model whose photos were everywhere on billboards, on TV, on the internet. Kira gave up her career as soon as she found out she was pregnant. No doubt she does not need this whole show business, house, husband, child, nothing else. The birth was awaited with trepidation. The name was chosen long and carefully, but they did not agree. Kira wanted to call her daughter Jessica. She loved the sea very much. Kieran insisted on Evie. When Evie was born, the parents thought it was a miracle. It was useless to say that they were not the first, they were not the last, and others also had children, others just had children. But theirs was a miracle. Kieran wanted his daughter to be called Evie, so he secretly registered the child from Kira and brought the birth certificate, which clearly said Adams Evie Kiranovna. Kira loved her husband so much that she didn't take offense and didn't say a word against it. Evie. So Evie, no matter what you call it, still a miracle extraordinary. Kira took care of the house and the baby. Kieran was lost in training and competitions. He became Russian champion 3 times and was going to the World Championships. and he was 6 years old when his mom got sick. Evie didn't understand what her mom was sick with, but she saw that her mom was in a lot of pain. It's now she knows that mom had advanced stage cancer. They tried to treat her, looked for specialists, wrote to foreign clinics, all in vain. The worst thing was the feeling of hopelessness, the impossibility to change anything. Kieran never left his wife's side. Constant care, medication by the hour. Everyone knew Kira was dying, tried to keep her with him for a while. After his wife's death, Kieran refused to take part in the World Championships, and the risk was too great to entrust Evie to his relatives. He couldn't leave her to anyone, not even for a day. It seemed to betray Kira. The sports career was over, only coaching was left. And Evie dragged him everywhere with him. Slowly he started coaching. She liked it, and she had the ability. His pupils consistently became prize winners in competitions. He was proud of their successes. Life settled down. The longing for Kira did not go anywhere, but somehow subsided. But then the management of the club changed, and the new director began to hint that medals are good, but money is better. Kieran was not going to mix sport and business. He quit his job and moved to the countryside with his daughter. "At least things are fair here," he said. While Evie sat in Stacy's kitchen, her dad poured his heart out to Vincent. "What about it?" "No. Look, it pisses me off. What kind of woman is she? Everything's wrong." "Well, don't go to her, come on." "I can't. As much as she pisses me off, she likes it when she's conquered." That's the pithy man talk. Stacy seemed like Arabella in front of Kieran, and after what was said, Evie felt like a complete fool who, knowing nothing about the man, managed to judge and, worse, instruct. How many times had Stacy berated herself for her language? To keep your mouth shut. Stacy tried to see less of Kieran. Stacy seemed innocent, but it was scary to look Kieran in the eye. And he'd come over, clean the lot, fix up the house. Of course they met, and Stacy's heart sank, but she didn't have the courage to talk. Who would she ask for advice? Wilkie, of course. It had been a while since they'd gossiped. It's time. Stacy spilled every last drop. She didn't hide anything. Wilkie didn't see what the problem was. Any competition? Any takers? No competitors. If you don't like it, you like it. Too much. Girl, I don't understand you. You go off to the middle of nowhere and stumble upon a prince. What's wrong? The prince's horse is dead, and he can't get there on foot. Do I have to propose to him myself? No. Wait a minute. I'll come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll decide what to do. Vincent said conquered how, with the whole estate dug up, the fence repaired, the taps and locks in good order. What else is there to do? In response, silence. All decent, polite and indifferent. It's no use consulting Vincent. He's already making fun of him. Kieran's pouring out his heart to him, and Petrenko's watching. He's laughing, and he can tell he can barely contain himself from laughing. Alex, do you think it's funny? I'm in front of him, and he's laughing. Yeah, laughing. There's a big guy sitting there and he can't say something about how he feels to a woman he likes. Of course it's funny to you. You got a wife, kids. I want a wife too, by the way, and not just any wife, but a very specific one. You're Vincent, of course, and I'm a boxer. If I hold on now, I risk getting my nose punched. My friend Kieran, when was the last time you climbed into a woman's window? What's windows got to do with it? There are parallels. It's got nothing to do with windows. It's all about the woman. Okay, you're the thin, ironic one. I'm thick, straightforward. Probably dumb, too. I don't get your parable about the windows. Are you hinting? I'm not hinting at the window. Romanticism is the way to go. You shouldn't climb through the window, of course. The result is predictable, either a night in jail or a black eye from a frying pan. Giving flowers is also not an option in our realities. What's Kieran gonna do? Bring her a drugstore chamomile? A rose from Auntie Esmeralda? There's no movie theaters or restaurants. Look, I never realized we were so bad at romance. Vincent sighed. Not much else, and we haven't come up with anything in 3 weeks. Alex's wife, Nelly, ironically in her maiden name of Goncharova, had been eavesdropping for a long time. What are the men talking about? My God, what primitive creatures they are. It is good that God first created them, and then, looking at his creation, decided to improve it. And the result was a woman she resented. When Nelly realized that the men were at an impasse, she decided to intervene. What the hell are flowers? Invite them to a dance at the club. Let the youngsters beat it. Buy a ring and go to propose. And if she says no, of course she'll say no. It would be strange if she agreed to marry me out of the blue. But she'll think about it, start evaluating the pros and cons. And what does that mean? That you, Kieran, will always be in her thoughts, and she won't be able to think of anything else. Only you. Isn't that what you want? Natasha, do you think it will work? Kieran hesitated. It worked for Andrew. Which Andrew, this one or that one? This one, I guess. It doesn't matter, as long as it worked. While Kieran was devising a plan to win Stacy over, she had an unexpected visitor. Vincent had arrived. Stacy was overjoyed. A family man, Alex's son. A reminder of happiness past. Vincent came with the express purpose of persuading Stacy to move back to the city. I've put the apartment on the market. Half of it's yours. Obviously, you can't get the same one, but you're going back to the city, he said. Vince, I would never claim my dad's apartment. We have our own place, Stacy said. But Mom's got a thing for this place. Why are you the main target? I get it. She can't get back at Dad anymore. She's taking it out on you. Vince, why sell? I mean, she was going to live there. She started renovations. She started renovations and she's done with them. Her goal was to torment you, and you just left. It's ruined, Vincent said. She doesn't need this apartment without you. Dima, I'm not going back to the city. Maybe someday, but not now, Stacy said. We'll go for a walk in the countryside. You'll see it's not a shithole at all. Look at my plot of land. I could use the money from the sale of the apartment. I really want a bathhouse. Dimka, how glad I am to see you. And how did you find me? Millie cracked. I won't say. But I thought there's another husband on the way. She didn't even give me a hint. Vincent grinned. Dim, are you coming for a couple days, or are you staying with me? Evie stood in the doorway. Stacy, Dad wants to know if you're coming over for dinner. We've got a guest. I'll go tell him it's dinner for 4, Evie said, and ran off. Sveta, I think I'll stay with you, don't you? Vincent asked. Yes, of course you can. But this girl is the neighborhood boxing champion, so be careful. The village has long since realized what's going on. It's just that these young men can't make up their minds. They're city folk. All those who had their sights on Kieran realized that they were out of luck and nobly stepped aside. I wanted to make a scene, of course. She came here, stole the only decent man, but what was the use? He didn't pay much attention to their charms without her. But you can tell him you loved him so much, but you let him go. Be happy. Noble. Kieran couldn't think of anything romantic to do. Everything seemed fine without the romance. Vincent's arrival somehow made it almost like a family. Lunches and dinners together, conversations over tea. Vincent didn't want to leave the house until almost midnight. And that was good for Kieran. Andrew and Nelly nudged Kieran. Don't be silent. She may not love you yet, but she's definitely interested. If you don't ask, you won't know. And Stacy has a visitor again. And what a guest. Millie's here. Millie's not just visiting, she's on a rescue mission to help her friend who's been missing. It seems Mila had an important event in her life that she wasn't in a hurry to tell her friends about. Her main goal was to help Stacy get back in touch with Kieran. We don't need a prince without a horse. We'll only look at the prince, Millie said after their first dinner together. Sveta, he can't take his eyes off you. He's a gorgeous man. I'm not talking about looks. There's nothing to talk about. He's so monumental in terms of character. A real counselor. Take a good look. You'll never meet another like him. What am I telling you? You know it. But for some reason you're stalling, or rather he's stalling. Well, it doesn't matter. You can push it. Millie, why don't you say something? Are you getting married? Come on, spill the beans. Vincent asked. Millie was indeed getting married. She assured him that she had no mercantile interests in the marriage. Knowing her friend, Stacy doubted that. The fact that she had been introduced to her future husband by her ex-husband suggested something. If it was an artist or a poet, one could believe in pure love without regard for money. But the fate of Millie decided to arrange her second husband, and in his entourage of people who believe in selfless love, there were no. He invited Millie to a pathos reception, where she met a young and handsome businessman, who coincidentally turned out to be unmarried. Now, Millie was doing everything she could to change his single status to married. Millie, besides being single, do you know anything about him? Young, good-looking, rich. What else is there to know? Stacy asked. Well, he's not that young. Do you know exactly how rich he is? Or did someone tell you? He's a businessman. So he's got money. Anyway, I know he's good-looking, Millie joked. Look, you're not a stupid woman, and you're not poor, by the way. I never thought you were someone's prey. You can't even tell me what his business is. What, he never told you? Why didn't you ask? You've always been 3 steps ahead. What happened now? I can't believe you're blinded by mad passion, Stacy said doubtfully. I've never met your businessman, but at his age and his money, you can't be lonely. Millie, are you saying he's a con man? I'm afraid he's an Alfonso. Honey, that's just my impression. I'm not insisting, but take a closer look. Don't be so quick to jump into the deep end. You've already taken the plunge twice. Kieran kept trying to talk to Stacy alone. It wasn't working. It's easy to say, don't be quiet, say it was Joshua, or Vincent following her around. And now Millie was in the way. There was a time and place, of course, but Kieran didn't look for it. He was afraid that if she didn't say anything, there was a chance she'd say no, and he'd have to step aside. And then how to live. One evening, when Joshua and Vincent had gone to the club and Millie had tactfully withdrawn, Kieran made up his mind. Stacy, you can see I like you. You don't have to say anything. If you say you're so nice but I don't want to hear it. I told you so you'd know. You already knew. Now you know for sure. Think it's up to you. Roma, I don't know what to say, Stacy replied, confused. It's good that you don't know, but I have something to ask. Or rather, advice. Kieran gave her daughter a shocked look. He'd raised her to be an athlete, a champion, and suddenly she said she wanted to be a lawyer. Why all of a sudden? All that hard work, all that training, all that success. Now it's all for nothing. And she won't listen to anything. I got a job on vacation as an assistant at a law firm. I drive every morning to the neighborhood of law offices. Since September, I've been enrolled in pre-law classes. I'm determined to go to law school. What do you want her to do? Become a champion? Then what? Ever wonder how your daughter will live after she finishes, no matter how brilliant her athletic career, with no education, no family, no kids? Stacy said, don't tell me you can do it all. You know you can't. Your daughter is wiser than you are. Don't let her get in the way. Stacy and Kieran had no way of having a romantic conversation, almost quarreling. Stacy decided to consult Millie. If her decision was firm, Stacy would back her up and Dad couldn't resist the two of them. Kieran couldn't think of anything romantic to do. He suspected Pushkin was mocking, but the idea of climbing through the window kept coming up. What do you mean romantic? Well, it's like a magic wand Digit's wedding. Kieran was preparing for Digit's wedding as if it were his own. He was even more excited. What's a newlywed couple to worry about? They've got it all figured out. He had total uncertainty. The wedding was a village wedding. Neighbors dragged pickles, homemade sausage, roasted chickens, compotes to Digit's house. The men had built a table for half a yard and benches to match. Digit's girlfriends made up riddles for the bride price and contests. Stacy was invited to the wedding, but she refused when she saw their tasks for the groom nearly crossing the boundaries of propriety. How did you guys have fun in the city? We have the internet. We see your flowery jokes. We don't expose our lips and other body parts. We don't change sex. That's embarrassing. And we're just having fun, the bridesmaids parried. The wedding was epochal. On the bride's side was one village, on the groom's side another. The bride has a richer village, and the groom has stronger men. The fight did not happen, although earlier the saying, "What wedding without a fight," was relevant. The bride justified the nickname Monkey. then grabbed the hem of her mother's lush dress, then hung on Alexa. Contests, jokes, toasts, songs, dances, people were having a lot of fun. Not often in the village there are events of such scale. They say that if the guests sing a lot at a wedding, the life of young people will be cheerful and happy. Now there will be enough talk for a month they will retell who did and said what. The heroes of these stories will say, it never happened. Maybe it didn't. It doesn't matter. And the annals of the village has already been entered, and with each retelling will be added new colorful details. If this omen works, then Djet and Alex will be the happiest people in the world. They'll also laugh on and off. Vince, the accordion player, played all night with a drink break. Did he have time for an appetizer? No, the people demanded songs. They sang the most heartfelt ones. There are so many golden lights, oh Kalina blossoms on the Morom Road. And of course Vladimirsky Central. And Central sounded especially heartfelt, although there were no prisoners in the village. Due to the fact that Vince did not have time to snack, in 3 hours we were left without an accordion. The young people rejoiced. At last we can turn on some normal music. Of course they did, but after about 10 minutes the older ones demanded, turn off this crap and turn on something soulful. The guys didn't know what was soulful for them, so they turned on disco 80s. They got it right. Even those who never got up from a chair went dancing. To the song Where the Maple Trees Are Noisy, Kieran walked up to Stacy and held out his hand. On the river wave. Stacy put her hand on Kieran's shoulder. Talked about love with you, she thought. They were dancing. Kieran thought, this is romance. And then suddenly it sounded, love is like a dream. It's gone. What do you mean it's gone? It hasn't started yet. Wrong song, he thought. No, it was the maple trees noisy. Stacy's heart sank. She wanted to tell her love so badly. But it seemed like a man should be the first to say. Kieran didn't talk about love, but he did say he'd take a step after her. No, I can't take that step. Why don't you say something, you chump with no feelings? Stacy chastised herself. The wedding was in full swing. There was singing and dancing, and Stacy suddenly remembered her and Alex. She remembered the wedding without longing, without hopelessness, with sadness, sorrow, and gratitude. For the first time since Alex's death, thinking about him was just a bright memory. But the tears did come. To avoid spoiling people's holiday, Stacy got up from the table, walked out of the courtyard, and walked toward the river. She didn't want to let go of her thoughts about Alex. The stinging sadness didn't hurt anymore. Stacy felt like Alex was letting her go. It was as if Mila had heard a voice. Go on living, be happy. Don't rush back to me, I'll wait. Kieran followed Stacy, but Millie stopped him. Don't let her be alone. She's saying goodbye to the past. Don't bother her. Millie didn't let Kieran go, she followed. That's it, she realized. Stacy's not going back to town. Her fate is a bit stymied here, but she's not going anywhere, Millie thought. That's what makes her so short-tempered. She deserves such a trustworthy man. Hey, what's her bad luck? She's always getting some fake prince. I just want to be loved. I guess to be loved, you have to love yourself. Fate is like a boomerang. It gives you what you put into the world. Stacy knows how to love, but Kieran is still calculating and guessing. I guess he miscalculated, Millie pondered. Well, what are we young and beautiful? We've got time for more. Millie found Stacy. She was sitting on the bank, looking out at the slow river. Millie sat down beside her and put her arm around her. Don't be sad, girlfriend. Say, are you going back? Not right now. The school year's just started. I can't just quit. It's a bit scary, of course. How will I live here in winter? But other people live here. They won't let you go to waste. Of course they won't. Especially a big one like that, Millie laughed. It's so funny to look at you. It's like Beauty and the Beast. The Beast is very handsome, though, and he can't take his eyes off you. Millie, what the hell do I want? I can't get Alex back. Does Kieran love me? Why do I get such great men? What's wrong with you? You're a bit hasty on the get part. Millie, what am I supposed to do? I like Kieran. Joshua wants his daddy. He's doing everything he can to push him. Vince has joined us. He's been here for 2 days. He's been staying for 2 weeks. It all makes sense. I like it. I don't get it. Honey, I can't just tell him I love him. He's healthy, he's strong, he's not afraid of anyone but me. Nothing. We'll get through the winter, and then we'll see. I'm going home tomorrow. I came to save you, but there's no one to save you from. I'm going to deal with my businessman and my ex-husband at the same time. Kieran glanced furtively at Stacy, though he wanted to look at her without stopping. He thought that fate had given him a chance to be happy again by sending this wonderful woman, but there was no way he dared to accept this gift. Fate might get angry. What could be easier, a hug, a kiss, to tell her how much I love her, he pondered. On Maylee's advice, he even bought a ring, even though he thought it was foolish. Stacy thought it was impossible to step into the same river twice. She was already happy with Alex and wouldn't be able to love like that again. But love has to be different. With the experience of troubles and mistakes, she decided. Millie's friend is right, Stacy does have luck with men. Fate has kept her from making mistakes. They say fate doesn't choose, but gives you a chance not to make mistakes. I didn't make a mistake with Alex and I won't forget him. Just as Kieran will never forget his wife. We have similar destinies. One grief for both of us. Then happiness must be shared, Stacy thought. She hoped that if Kieran didn't dare to speak, their shared happiness might not happen. Come on, Kieran, say something, she mentally pleaded. Kieran didn't say anything. Kieran did. He hugged Stacy, kissed her, and pulled a ring box from his pocket. Stacy, will you marry me? He asked. Stacy was confused. There was such a look of bewilderment on her face that Kieran laughed. That's exactly the reaction I was expecting, he said. That's what Maylee said. What Maylee before Pushkin said that. You'll say no, but you'll think about it. Or will you not refuse? I know it's foolish to hope you'll say yes right away. But you'll take the ring. You'll look at it and think of me. Stacy smiled enigmatically and pressed herself tighter against Kieran. She thought to herself that she was already thinking about him. When Maggie went to the bank to collect her inheritance, she expected nothing. And when the orphan opened the safe deposit box. On another cold January morning, Maggie lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. For 6 months now, every day had begun the same way. She lay there and thought with horror that a dull, meaningless day lay ahead of her. Maggie was not yet 30 years old. She wasn't bad looking, but finding a husband and building a family had never worked out for her. Her rare liaisons with men didn't last more than 6 months. She didn't understand why she had no luck on the personal front. Either men were not suitable, or her character was not quite good. But Maggie wasn't too worried about that. She didn't want to start any serious relationships. For several years, she had been immersed in caring for her elderly grandmother, the kindest woman who had raised Maggie since she was 3 years old, ever since her parents had been killed in an accident. She and Grandma had bailed each other out back then. The grandmother had kept the girl out of the orphanage by taking over her upbringing, and Maggie gave her grandmother new meanings in life, the meaning of which was to raise her beloved granddaughter. Most likely, this is what helped the woman cope with the loss of her only son and daughter-in-law. 3 years ago, the grandmother fell ill. She could move around the apartment by herself, but still she needed constant care. And of course, her granddaughter began to take care of her, driving her to doctors, shopping, doing all the housework. At the time, Maggie was 26 years old. She had just found a good job with a decent salary and was preparing to go for a promotion. Maggie even considered moving out of her grandmother's apartment into her own first rented, and then planned to take out a mortgage. But the illness of the old woman crossed all these plans. Without thinking, Maggie forgot about career heights, stayed in her old position, and all her free time devoted to her grandmother. They were unpretentious in life, so Maggie's salary and grandmother's payments were enough to pay for doctors and medicines. Maggie had little memory of her parents. They were often on the road before their deaths, so they left their young daughter to her grandmother. Because of this, Maggie had only a few memories of her parents, and she thought some of them were just dreams. And she and her grandmother hit it off from the start. The older woman had managed to replace Maggie's father and mother. In all the years they had lived together, they had never had a single major conflict. Even when Maggie was going through a transitional age, it was probably because her grandmother worked as a school teacher, and had a good understanding of how to get along with children. For Maggie, her grandmother was a self-evident part of her life, and she didn't think about her death. Not even when the woman had had an unfortunate accident 3 years ago. Maggie pushed away thoughts of her grandmother soon to be gone. She just gave all the help she could, tried to organize good treatment, and hoped for the best. Grandma didn't get any worse before she died. She wasn't taken to the hospital. She spent the day as usual. She read, watched TV, called her neighbor, and inquired about her granddaughter's life. Toward nightfall, she said goodnight to Maggie and she went to her room. The next day, Grandma didn't wake up. The days of the funeral had merged into one terrible dream for Maggie. She didn't even remember how she had organized everything. How did the funeral and the wake go? She wanted to get over it and forget it all. But after all the funeral procedures came an even worse state for Maggie's silence. It was not only psychologically but physically hard for her to return after work to an apartment where no one was waiting for her. An apartment where the TV didn't work, where there was no aroma of something delicious, where there was no warmth and coziness. She hated waking up in the morning for exactly the same reason. No one else wished her a good morning and good luck before work. She didn't understand why she had to get up every morning and come home every evening. 6 months of despondency, only occasionally replaced by happy evenings spent with her friend in cafes or at each other's houses. This morning didn't bode well for the day to be any different from the previous ones. Maggie reluctantly got up, drank her coffee and sandwich, and got ready for work, despite her good paycheck. Maggie dressed, to put it mildly, without glamour, wore the same things for several years, and her winter down jacket, from which every now and then the fluff was trying to pop out, had recently celebrated its 5-year anniversary. So from the outside, she gave the impression of a poor girl. A typical gray mouse. Almost running, she reached the streetcar stop and went to work. And at 8:55, the office was already noisy. The bosses were strict about tardiness. Maggie walked into her office, which her friend Samantha and 2 other female co-workers shared with her. "What are you like? You're not alive, are you?" Maggie's friend asked thoughtfully as she sat down in her seat. "I don't know, I can't do the same thing every day." "It's boring." Maggie showed a thick stack of papers on her desk. "What's all this for?" "You didn't say that when you walked into this office." Samantha reminded Maggie of her first days on the job 4 years ago. Indeed, Maggie was an exemplary worker with bright eyes and a well-functioning brain. She genuinely loved her job. She didn't just go to it for the money. Colleagues were even afraid to approach her at first, thinking that such efficiency hides a cunning, bossy girl, ready to go over the heads of other employees for the sake of her career. But Samantha managed at some point to break through this workaholic shell and see her as a very ordinary, modest and kind girl. Most likely they managed to get close on the contrast. Unlike Maggie, Samantha was an extremely sociable, cheerful girl, although she was not characterized by great efficiency. Sometimes even Maggie had to cover Samantha's shortcomings in front of her superiors, but such help from her colleague was not worth much trouble. Things had changed in the last 6 months. Maggie would come to the office, permeate the office, perform her work tasks, and leave. Each time, her friend tried to cheer Maggie up in some way. This time, she made the same attempt. "Meg, why don't we go check it out? I heard they opened a new bar near here today. The girls say it's a great place." Well, why not? It had been over a month since the last time she'd been out with her friend, and Maggie decided to give herself a break. But a couple minutes later, she realized, "Oh no, I can't tonight." "Why not? Come on, we got to get back to normal. You want to go shopping before the bar? 'Cause you've turned into such an asshole." "No, I'd really like to go, but I already made an appointment to go to the bank today." "Is there something wrong with your card, or did your paycheck not come in yesterday?" "There's nothing wrong with my paycheck, it's just, yesterday was exactly 6 months since Grandma left. I've got an inheritance to settle. I thought I wouldn't have to do anything else but file the deed to the apartment. But the notary called and said there's a safe deposit box in the bank. I'm going to go check it out today. So let's reschedule the bar for tomorrow, for example." Okay, if that's the case, sure. Maybe I'll go with you just in case. You're going out of the bank alone tonight, you know it's dangerous." "Don't worry about it, I'll go by myself. There won't be any diamonds. My grandmother was a school teacher, not a rich woman." I wouldn't be surprised if there's been some kind of mistake and the bank just turns me back home. You know, like the safety deposit box got mixed up. It wasn't really Grandma's. The friends finished talking and got to work. The day was routine. The boss came in only once, politely asked her friend to correct mistakes in the report and left. And Maggie periodically returned her thoughts to this mysterious safe deposit box, about which she had told. The girl did not think much about the inheritance and perceived the upcoming trip to the bank as a normal bureaucratic procedure. But now it no longer seemed to her as something ordinary. If it was not a mistake, what could lie there? Perhaps some family jewelry. But then why in such a strange place? A safety deposit box. Jewelry is usually kept at home to be admired or worn if desired. That's what they're for. This was a safe deposit box. Maggie couldn't even remember the last time her grandmother had been to the bank, probably before she got sick. Anyway, the closer it got to the end of the day, the more interested Maggie became. Finally, the clock showed 6 p.m., and all the employees, as if on cue, began to pack up to leave. Maggie was not usually one of them. She could stay in her office alone until 7, 8, and sometimes even 21. Since the interest in work was lost, she gave up this habit and began to return with everyone else. Perhaps in the crowd of coworkers walking to their bus stops, Maggie felt less lonely. This time, too, she jumped up with everyone else, but not out of any desire to overcome loneliness. She had to take the streetcar to the bank, but in the other direction. Maggie said goodbye to Samantha and a few other coworkers and ran to the stop. The streetcar came almost immediately. Maggie got on and didn't even have to take an empty seat, sitting near the door. There were only 2 stops to go, but for Maggie the time dragged so slowly that it seemed to her as if the streetcar was going across town. She kept glancing at her watch, worried about not getting there before the bank closed. It closed at 7 p.m., which was why Maggie was so worried. When she got to the right stop, Maggie jumped off the streetcar and ran to the bank. Fortunately, it was still half an hour before closing time. The girl took a little breath and entered the premises, taking a number in the electronic queue. Maggie didn't have to wait long. There wasn't particularly anyone else in the bank at this time. Maggie walked over to the right window and sat down near it. The banker, a full-bodied man in his 40s, was obviously going home early and was already putting things in his briefcase. "Hello," Maggie said at first and took out her papers. "Hello," the banker said, giving Maggie a wry look. "I need access to a safety deposit box." The man leaned slightly out of the window and looked at Maggie again, more carefully. "Why do you need a safety deposit box?" "I want to see what it looks like," Maggie replied irritably, glancing at the banker's name tag, which read in gold letters, "Stephen Swan, Senior Officer." "Stephen, don't you know what people need a safety deposit box for?" "Don't be rude, girl," replied the banker sternly. "Give me the number of the box. Give me your passport." The banker looked through the passport, wrote down some data, entered the number of the safe deposit box into the computer. "This box is not in your name," the man said in the same stern tone. "That's right, it's not in my name. The box belonged to my grandmother. She passed away 6 months ago and I inherited it. Here's the certificate of inheritance." Maggie handed the paper to the banker. "It says there was a safe deposit box in the property." The banker fidgeted with the certificate, looked at the passport again, and went somewhere else. 2 minutes later, he came back and said unhappily, "All right, follow me." Maggie went with him into another room. The banker opened a heavy metal door, behind which there were hundreds of cells of different sizes. The man looked around and went to one of the boxes. He slipped a small key into the keyhole and opened the lock. Sighing heavily, he reluctantly looked into the cell and stunned. After standing for a couple of seconds, in a quiet voice he was able to utter, "Approach, please. The cell is open." Maggie walked leisurely to the box, as if she wanted a little suspense, and there was plenty of suspense to go around. In the box was a bar of gold. "Can I take it?" Maggie asked in a whisper. "Of course, it's your property now," the banker replied kindly. He frowned unhappily and then disappeared. Maggie took the ingot in her hands. The bullion looked exactly like it did in the movies. It glistened, shimmering under the light of the bank lamp. It was stamped with the inscription 999.91 thousand grams. The first number means the grade, the banker explained to Maggie, and the second is the weight. On the back there was another stamp with a number and other necessary information to prove authenticity. Maggie didn't really listen to what the banker was telling her. She couldn't believe that she was holding a kilogram of pure gold. Even to the touch, it was different from other metal objects of the same size. It seemed to her that the ingot was soft. It felt warm. "What am I supposed to do with it?" Maggie asked rhetorically. The banker shrugged in response. His eyes showed that he was upset that the bullion was not his. An odd reaction for a banker who operated with large sums of money and jewelry on a daily basis. Perhaps he had only served wealthy clients before, and the appearance of large sums of money was no surprise to them. And here a poor girl got a fortune, just like that, instantaneously. Some people dream of such things all their lives, and perhaps the banker was one of those people. After standing for a few seconds, he warned Maggie that he had to go and get a form for receiving the contents of the safe deposit box. Maggie didn't bother with the bureaucratic wording and continued to look at the gold. The banker put another bank employee in his place, apparently to keep Maggie from robbing the bank. Maggie shifted her gaze from the bullion to her open safe deposit box. There was some cardboard at the bottom of the box, which was the same color as the box itself, so the bankers didn't pay attention to it. "Excuse me, please," Maggie said to the stone-faced employee. "There's something else in the box. Can I take that too?" "If the box is yours, you can," the emotionless employee replied. Maggie carefully pulled out the cardboard. It turned out to be a heavy paper envelope. There was no addressee, no sender's name, and no stamps on the envelope. Maggie simply put the unopened envelope in her bag. She realized there was some message from her grandmother inside, and she didn't want to read it in front of strangers. "Before you leave, you'll need to sign some papers," the banker suddenly returned. "Sure. Where do I have to go?" "It's protocol to sign right here. But do you really want to take this with you?" The man nodded his head at the ingot. "Yes, why do you ask?" Maggie wondered. "Wouldn't it be safer to leave it in the safe deposit box? Or do you want to sell the bullion right now?" "No, I have all my accounts in another bank, and I think that's where the bullion should be deposited in the near future. I like things to be in their proper place." For a few minutes, Maggie thought that it was really safer to leave such wealth in the bank. But it was not only the desire to move the bullion to another bank that possessed her. The little gold brick had a magical attraction, and Maggie did not want to give it back right away. She wanted to look at it, put it somewhere at home, maybe even show it to a friend. "As you wish. It's your right," the banker said quickly. "Follow me." Having completed all the bureaucratic procedures with the registration of the bullion, Maggie went home. She didn't want to take public transportation with the gold, so she called a cab. During the ride, she had a twofold feeling. On the one hand, she was overwhelmed by the euphoria of knowing that she was carrying a kilogram of gold worth about $1 million in her bag. On the other hand, she was periodically overcome with panic anxiety. She kept glancing askew at the cab driver, drawing in her mind stories in which he would take her out into the woods and take away her bag. Then Maggie scrutinized the window to see if the cab driver was taking her the right way. "Say, why are we going this way?" she asked when the car turned off the avenue that ran along the streetcar tracks. "There are repair works ahead," replied the driver. "They're on their way," the cab driver replied calmly. "We'll be stuck in traffic for half an hour. But this way we go faster in the yards." Maggie's heart began to beat strongly. It became difficult for her to breathe. After a couple minutes, she managed to pull herself together. She took out her cell phone and dialed 112 on it beforehand. Maggie watched the road even more carefully. It was getting dark outside and it was hard to see anything. Then she moved to the middle of the back seat of the car and looked out the driver's window. By the light of the headlights, she recognized a small street that ran along the main avenue. It was a little over 1 kilometer to the house. Maggie calmed down a little and moved to the passenger door again. "Don't worry, we'll be there in a few minutes," the cab driver said carefully, watching Maggie's tossing about in the back seat. "Yes, all right," Maggie answered him calmly, her voice trembling slightly. Less than a minute later, the car turned again. "Are you off the right road?" the navigator said loudly. And Maggie realized she couldn't stay in the car any longer. "Stop here, please," she shouted. "What do you mean here?" "We're just a little bit away," the cab driver replied calmly. "I know, but I need to get out here urgently." "Okay, whatever you say," the cabbie sighed heavily and stopped the car. Maggie quickly shoved the fare money into the cab driver's hands and got out of the car. Almost at a run, she headed toward her house. It wasn't much farther, but the second strange turn seemed too suspicious to Maggie. She ran down the very street that ran along the avenue, and soon she saw that there was a road service on it. And right in the middle of it was a fenced-in hole dug. The workers were changing a pipe that ran across both the avenue and this street, and so there was nothing suspicious in the cab driver's sudden turns. He was, however, looking for the easiest way to get to the right house. Maggie breathed a sigh of relief and walked toward her house with a quiet step. She even felt a little ashamed of her overcautiousness. How could the cab driver have known that she had something expensive in her bag? Yes, sudden riches rarely lead to good things. It wasn't long before Maggie saw her 5-story building on the horizon. Just as she turned into the yard, someone tugged her purse sharply, but Maggie held it firmly in her hands. She turned around and saw a man with a scarf hat wrapped around his face. He was pulling the bag toward him. But Maggie had no intention of letting her go. She started screaming loudly. At that moment, 2 men approached them, and the man in the scarf, apparently frightened, let go of the purse and started to run. No one caught up with him. The men approached Maggie. "Are you all right?" one of them asked fearfully. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you," Maggie said, out of breath. "I'm calling the police," the other man said, pulling out his cell phone. "Thank you." Maggie turned to both of them. "I don't think he would have gotten away if it wasn't for you." "Why are you walking alone at this hour?" "I'm used to it. I've been walking alone all my life." And about this time, Maggie answered. She talked to her casual acquaintances for a while longer, and the police arrived at the scene. The officers quickly took statements from Maggie and witnesses, took pictures of the purse, and went to the next call. Maggie thanked the men again and went home. She didn't like that the police officers left so quickly. It even seemed to Maggie that they weren't even going to look for anyone. They just machine-filled all the paperwork and drove away. She realized that the cops had a heavy workload, but they could have at least taken her to the station so that the experts could fingerprint the bag, make a sketch, and do everything else they usually did in detective shows. Almost immediately, however, Maggie remembered that the man was wearing gloves, and fingerprinting her bag probably didn't make sense. She went up to the second floor, entered the apartment, and felt fear again, a real animal fear for her life. What if the perpetrator decided to come back? After all, if he attacked Maggie right outside her house, that meant he knew her home address. Maggie pulled out her cell phone and selected one of Samantha's contacts. "Come see me soon, please," she said. "I'll explain everything later, but it's really hard for me to be alone right now. Thank you. I'll be waiting." Maggie was afraid that her friend still went to the bar after work and would not see her call. But from the sounds of it, Samantha was already home. In fact, Maggie had no one else to call for help. Her childhood friends had moved away to different cities, and Samantha was the only person she had left who was truly close to her. When her friend agreed to come over, Maggie felt much calmer. She made tea and sat down on the couch. She placed her purse next to her, taking a few sips. Maggie took the purse in her hands, carefully undid the zipper, and opened it. The gold bar was in place. Before she did so, she had thought that the gold might not be in the purse, because after the attack she hadn't even checked to see if the man had taken anything. But everything was fine. Maggie didn't bother to pull out the bullion, zipped up the bag and set it back on the couch. What could it have been, she thought? An accident? No, I don't believe in such coincidences. Right outside my house, a bandit purposely tried to snatch my purse. There's no such thing as coincidence. Then who set him on me? The only person who knew she had the gold bar was the banker, Stephen. How much animosity had he treated her with? And when he saw the bar, a completely different face. That's when he plotted to take it from me, Maggie decided. He's seen my passport, he knows where I live. He's a rascal. He's been away several times, probably calling his accomplices. Maybe it's a standard pattern for them to hunt down lonely women and take their valuables. What a nightmare. Maggie mentally uttered many more words to the banker, but stopped herself at one point. Why him, after all? Didn't anyone else know that I might have something valuable in my bag? Like the other bank employees or Samantha. I told her I was going to the bank to collect my grandmother's inheritance. Maggie immediately dismissed that theory. She had known her friend Samantha for so many years, and she had never shown that she was capable of something like this. Yes, Samantha didn't have a rigid discipline, she had a rather infantile attitude to life. But committing crimes. And against whom? Against her best friend? No, that was definitely out of the question. After sitting for a while longer, Maggie remembered the letter. She opened the inside pocket of her bag and pulled out an envelope. Carefully she opened it and took out a quadruple folded piece of paper and unfolded it. As expected, it was a letter from her grandmother, written in beautiful handwriting in black ink. The lines were scrawled there, "Dear Maggie, if you are reading this letter, it has probably been over 6 months since I have been gone from this world. I am writing this to you at a time when you are diligently preparing for your first university exams. You are going through a difficult period, searching for yourself, new challenges from life. That's why I didn't start this conversation right now, but decided to write a letter to the future. Maybe the day will come when I will be ready to tell you this story personally, but I realize that I am not getting younger every year. So just in case, I will tell you everything in a letter. After all, death may precede the moment of my readiness to talk to you. As a child, you sometimes asked about your grandfather, and I usually evaded answering your questions. As you may remember, your grandfather Archie Swan was a geologist, looking for minerals in the east of the country. He and his group found some gold deposits. This place was a mile from the gold mines known to the state at that time, and the group did not hurry to inform the local authorities, but decided to organize their own mining. I don't think it was a personal desire of your grandfather and his colleagues to get rich. He told me that he just didn't trust the local authorities. Most likely they would have organized underground mines and sent the geologists back to town quickly, not wanting to let that happen. The group has started to develop the mine on their own. I don't know if it was really like Grandpa told me. In any case, I don't judge him. And you don't judge, remember. I've been telling you, since you were a kid, that you can't judge anyone in this life. Anyway, the place turned out to be rich. They mined up to 100 grams of gold a day. And so it went on for almost 2 weeks. One day they were spotted by workers from the official mines. One of them was called Damien Stephen. They had known Grandpa for several years. They were even family friends at first. Damien used to come to our house. But after that, it was like a cat got between them. I guess your grandfather didn't like the fact that Damien was going to frame the mine superintendent to take his place. They've been enemies ever since. Of course, when Damien saw that your grandfather was doing illegal mining, he immediately wrote a denunciation on the whole group. It was the 1960s, the so-called thaw. People were coming out of prison, and for us, the exact opposite happened. Your grandfather was sent to a camp for 5 years for embezzling state property, or whatever they called it. We were lucky 10 years before that. The same crime had been punished much more harshly. Your dad was 2 years old then, and until he was 5, I brought him up on my own. Grandpa was released a couple of years early for good behavior. I didn't know at that time that when the group was arrested, they didn't hand over all the gold they had gotten to the police. But somehow Damien found out about it. As soon as he learned that my grandfather was free, he began to torment our family and the families of other members of the geological group. For some reason, he demanded that the gold be returned to him and kept threatening to turn Grandpa in to the authorities. Then one day, Grandpa and his comrades got fed up with Damien's behavior. I don't know what they did to him, but after that they put Damien in jail for 5 years. 2 years later came the news that he died in prison. From then on, we lived like a normal Soviet family. Grandpa tried not to remember about the years spent in the camp, and I didn't remind him either. 30 years passed, the Soviet Union collapsed. And the time came when everything became possible. We were excited about your birth and forgot about what happened 30 years ago. But soon Grandpa became ill. He was still on his feet, but but he realized he didn't have long to live. One day, when he and I were alone in the apartment, your grandfather pulled back the closet, cut a piece of linoleum from under the floorboards with a knife, and pulled out several paper bags. He opened them up and laid out many, many little pieces of gold on the table. They were dirty, unformed lumps, as if they had just been pulled from a mountain stream. I realized that back then, in the 60s, he never gave all the gold he had mined to the state. That same day, we took the jewelry to the smelting plant. We were not even asked where we got such wealth from. In the end, we managed to melt the gold into a kilogram bar. There was even a little bit left over. This remaining part helped us a lot in the difficult 90s. So we never had any problems, for example, with getting you ready for school. 6 months later, Grandpa died. I kept that bullion in the closet under layers of old bedding. I even forgot about it for a while. But now I realize that it's a bad idea to keep jewelry in my underwear, and I need to take it to the bank. I don't know if I'd dare tell you the whole story in my lifetime. Probably not. Forgive me, please, for not being quite frank with you. But there are some things you shouldn't be too quick to tell. Now you know one of the simplest secrets of our family destiny. I hope you'll respond to it with understanding. Be careful with the gold. But sudden wealth always attracts flocks of kites. Take care of yourself. Love you and kisses. Always your grandmother with tears in her eyes. Of course, she didn't think to take offense at either her grandfather or grandmother. Maggie walked over to the closet that had been against the wall all her life. With difficulty, but she managed to push it back a little. She squatted down and examined the linoleum. Right next to the baseboard, Maggie saw these very incisions of her grandfather's. She wanted to see what the hiding place under the floorboard looked like, but at that moment the intercom rang. Maggie picked up the phone and heard Samantha's familiar voice. Walking up to the apartment, her friend immediately began to question Alexandra. "Well, what happened to you? I've never driven so fast before. You scared me, friend." "Come follow me," Maggie answered her quietly and walked into the room. She sat her friend on the couch, silently took her bag, opened it and pulled out a bar. "Look what it is." Samantha goggled and didn't take her eyes off the gold. A 1-kilogram bar, pure gold. "May I?" Samantha held out her hands for the bar. Maggie handed it to her. "Wow. Did your grandmother bequeath this to you?" "Yes," Maggie replied and briefly recounted the contents of her grandmother's letter. "You're a good girl, my friend. That's lucky for you. How much is it now in money?" "I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet." Such wealth. She didn't even look. Samantha was surprised and took out her phone. "Okay, let's see. $4,700,000, Maggie." "Yeah, by the standards of our small town, that's a lot of money. That's 2 apartments in your pocket." Maggie was surprised at the value of her inheritance. She thought the bullion would be worth less than $100,000, and here it was worth so much. So no wonder someone was after her. "Have you figured out where you're going to spend the money?" Samantha asked curiously. "No, not yet," Maggie replied. "I didn't call you just because of the bullion." "So what happened?" "When I was coming home with the bullion, someone tried to rob me." "How'd you get away?" "No. A passerby spooked the guy. Then the police came." "I'm really scared." "I see. Someone was jealous of your sudden wealth." "Did the police say anything?" "No, they said they'd look into it. Well, the usual. But I suspect one person. The banker who handled my inheritance. He's the only one who knew I had gold in my bag." "Exactly, I know that little thing." "A new breed," Samantha nodded. "I had a banker who, let's just say, almost ripped me off." "Really? You didn't tell me about it?" "Yeah, it was a long time ago. So what did you tell the police about this scumbag?" "No, I was in shock at the time. I only remembered about the banker when I got home." "You didn't tell them about the prime suspect. Let's go to the police right now. You can tell me everything." "What's it like now?" Maggie was surprised. "Well, when else? When you get attacked a second time. or when that banker is on vacation somewhere in the Canary Islands. Let's go now. What if you think it needs to be done so urgently? Maggie got up from the couch and started to get ready, but soon stopped. Wait, Samantha. Maggie sat down and asked her friend to sit down. Listen, I didn't think at all maybe I shouldn't have dragged you into all this. You know, it's very dangerous. Any minute now, they're going to want to do it again. Attack me, break into my apartment. I don't want you near me at that moment because they could kill you. I don't want to hear that anymore. Samantha replied sternly. If they come at the two of us, it will mean only one thing: we will fight back. So don't worry about me, friend. We've been through worse. And about the apartment, they probably know your address. The bank has all the details. Well, here's what we'll do after the police station. We'll go to my place. You'll stay at my apartment for the duration of the investigation. They don't know my address. Thank you very much. They hugged and walked downstairs to Samantha's car. On the way, Maggie thought about her friend's courage. I am a professional editor with a degree in philology and 20 years of experience. Here is the edited text with your recommendations. She hadn't even raised an eyebrow when she knew they could be in danger right now. Maggie chided herself for being suspicious of her friend. Even though she dismissed them right away, it turns out Samantha is even more than a true friend. She is a fearless person. Maggie was so impressed by her friend's words and decisive actions that she didn't even think about the strangeness of Samantha's behavior. What if she was only acting so boldly because she was sure she was safe? It's not like her accomplices are going to attack her themselves, so she's playing the hero. But Alexandra did not care about these thoughts. She thought she should try again to dissuade Samantha from helping her so insistently. At the very least, explain to her that staying with her was not the safest idea. Samantha, are you sure I won't be in the way? Maggie asked, hoping for some kind of personal circumstance. Maggie's friend, why are you laughing? You know that I have no one to bother you. I've been living alone for so long, Samantha replied. We could use a man right now, of course. Come on, we can manage without men, Maggie replied. She realized that it was pointless to talk her friend out of it and decided not to resist. When they reached the police station, they went to the front office. Hello, we'd like to make a statement. Samantha began to speak loudly into the window of the duty officer. Samantha, maybe I should do it, Maggie interrupted her friend, reminding her that she was the victim here. Yes, of course, Samantha slowed down a bit. Okay, girls. Can you please decide what you want? Asked the officer on duty irritably. You see, Maggie began to explain quietly. I was attacked today. They wanted to rob me. So you didn't listen. The officer on duty took out a piece of paper from under the table. Write a statement. No, you don't understand me, Maggie continued calmly. The police have already come. I gave them a statement, and they took all the statements they needed. Then what do you want? Wait until they call you, the policeman replied, still irritated. What's the matter with you? When they call you, then come back. Samantha jumped in. Can you finish listening to the man, or are you going to interrupt him every 10 seconds? Okay, woman, who are you? The employee turned to Samantha. Do you want me to take you out? You don't need to take anyone out. Maggie modestly stood up for her friend. The point is that I remembered some new circumstances regarding the attack. I got you. What's your last name? Said the officer on duty. Swan, Maggie replied. Stand by. The desk clerk turned to the computer and typed in Maggie's last name. Then he picked up the phone and dialed a number. Comrade Major, here on your today's case the victim came. Says new circumstances have opened, that she is even so good. I'll send her to you. The duty officer hung up the phone and turned to Maggie. Well, your case has already found the right person. Come to the 7th office, they'll meet you there. How did they find me? Samantha asked loudly. She was clearly more surprised than Alexandra. Samantha wanted to go with her friend, but the duty officer stopped her. Citizen, you wait here. No one let you in. What do you mean, nobody let me in? I'm the victim's friend. Her only support, Samantha began to resent me. "You're a stranger," the cop replied sternly. "Samantha, don't worry. I can handle it," Maggie reassured her friend and walked straight down the hall. The 7th office was not far from the gatehouse. When she reached the door, she stopped. After a few seconds, a man in civilian clothes came out of the office. "Are you Swan?" he asked at once. "Yes," Alexandra answered. "I'm an investigator. Stephen is my last name. I've been handed the case of your assault. Anyway, we found your failed burglar on a hot lead. And who was he? He's a repeat offender. Got out of prison 6 months ago for robbery. Decided to pick up where he left off. Didn't even change neighborhoods. He must have lost his touch while he was in prison. Even forgot about the cameras. 2 hits in an hour, so we got him down quick. Now you'll have to be identified. You caught him so fast," said Investigator Stephen. "What if he remembers me for the lineup?" Maggie was worried. "Look, he must have remembered you when he tried to steal your bag. We'll take security measures for your peace of mind, though. You'll be looking at him through mirrored glass. He won't be able to see you." "Okay," Maggie replied calmly. The investigator went back into the office and returned 30 seconds later. "Come in. Everything is ready." Maggie, worried, walked into the office. Along the wall, there was indeed a window with a man sitting behind it. "Excuse me, is he the only one?" "And that one is going to sit." Maggie whispered to the investigator. "I thought a lineup was when you had to choose among several people." "This is a different identification," Stephen whispered back to her. "Not only can't he see you, he can't hear you. So you can talk in full voice." "Okay," Maggie said, and looked at the man behind the glass. He looked like that man, but he didn't. You see, he was wearing a hat and a scarf, and the scarf covered his face. All you could see was his eyes. "Okay, wait a second," said the investigator. He went to his desk, opened a drawer, and took out a cellophane bag with his belongings. Then he went into the bright room where the alleged robber was sitting and handed him the items. The man put on his hat, wrapped himself in a scarf, and the investigator returned to Maggie. "Well, that's the way it is now. What do you think?" "It looks like it now," Maggie exclaimed. The exact replica of the robber was sitting in front of her. "That's great. Go into the next office. We'll do the proper paperwork," said Stephen. Maggie went into the next office. A minute later, the investigator went in as well. "Tell me, please, have you questioned him yet?" Maggie asked. "We have." "What are you interested in?" Stephen asked incredulously. "I just wanted to know. Did he say anything about the client?" "What client?" "Citizen Swan. The man's a repeat offender. He spent his whole life snatching purses from girls. No one ordered you, don't worry." "Oh, really? Well, then I'm free to go, right?" Maggie asked. Investigator Stephen handed her a piece of paper. "Sign here. And you can go now that you've signed it." Maggie left the investigator's office. No sooner had she reached the front desk than Samantha pounced on her with questions. "Did you find it?" "We did. Some kind of gangbanger." "So he acted on his own?" Samantha asked. "Yes, as it turned out, Lucius had nothing to do with it. The friends went outside and got into the car." "What's up? Where should I take you?" "My place or yours?" Samantha asked, pulling out of the police parking lot. "Since everything ended so well, let's go to my place. I think we both need a little rest." "I've had the wine for almost a year now," Maggie said. "Different conversation," friend Samantha said cheerfully. "Are you sure you don't want to come to my place? You're not afraid?" "Why should I be afraid when they found him?" "Then it was just a coincidence, and no one ordered me." I get it, Samantha said sneeringly. "Are you worried about your diamonds?" No, Maggie laughed. "I brought them with me. They're in my bag." What Samantha marveled out loud. "You've been carrying diamonds with you all this time?" Of course, it didn't seem safe to leave them at home, especially in case the police needed them. I didn't know how quickly they'd solve things there. Maybe they'd take them as evidence. "I'm amazed at you," Samantha said, her mood changing. They tried to snatch your bag just a couple hours ago, and you're carrying diamonds. Are you so fearless? Why are you so worried? I'm in the car with you. No one knows I'm carrying diamonds. You're lucky to be with me, Maggie said. Okay, maybe you did the right thing. But next time, should I warn you that you have such a valuable cargo with you? They drove in silence to Maggie's apartment. Damn it. I forgot to turn off the lights, she said, looking out of the car at her windows. The meters are counting there, Samantha laughed. She probably has diamonds in her bag. Does she think she's paying her utilities? She parked not far from the driveway. The friends went up to Maggie's apartment. The front door was slightly ajar. Did you forget to lock the door too? Samantha asked in a whisper. I don't remember. This is crazy. Maggie replied and slowly opened the door. She carefully stepped into the hallway and walked into the room. What the hell is this? I knew it. The whole room was trashed, all the cabinets and drawers were open, and things from there were strewn all over the floor. It was the same mess in the kitchen and the other room. What happened here? Samantha asked as she entered the room. There can't be any more coincidences, Maggie said excitedly. They were looking for diamonds. But it could be that. Samantha obviously tried to find another explanation for what had happened, but she couldn't. Yeah, you're right. I don't think it's just a coincidence. And now we'll make sure of it, Maggie said in a shaky voice, and went into the second room. There she went to a cabinet, all the drawers of which had been pulled out. She took one of the drawers and pulled out a small box and an envelope. From the jewelry box, Maggie pulled out earrings, and from the envelope, several $100 bills. Look, these are all my rainy day savings. I've had them here for about 5 years. Earrings that a relative gave me. They're not worth as much as diamonds, of course. But they're not cheap either. If they just wanted to make a profit out of this apartment, they'd have taken them anyway. I'm not even talking about the dollars. No, they were looking for diamonds. My grandmother told me to be careful with them. Okay, we need to call the police. Call the detectives, Maggie said, sat down on the couch and looked at Samantha. Look, really, this is getting out of hand. I'm asking you to go home. It's very dangerous with me right now. I'm not interested in hearing you worry about me, Samantha replied firmly. Maggie got up and walked to the front door. She closed all the locks that were there and even put a wooden mop against the handle, making a makeshift lock. Mag, was this lying here? Samantha asked from the room. What do you mean? Maggie walked back into the living room and looked at her friend. Samantha was standing by the desk. All the papers and stationery that had been lying there had been thrown to the floor. The only thing left on the desk was a small note. Maggie walked over to the desk, picked up the note, and read what was written on it. If you value your life even a little, take the diamonds back to where you got them from. Maggie put the note on the table and covered her face with her hands. Mag, what are you doing? Samantha walked over to her friend and hugged her. It's clear now that it's the banker who wants you to return the diamonds to where you took them from. It's clearly a safety deposit box. So he got caught. He thought you'd freak out, quietly bring the diamonds to the bank, and he'd take them for himself. But that's okay. Now you'll tell the police he'll be arrested, and the whole adventure will be over. I really hope so, Maggie whispered back. A few minutes later, the intercom rang. The police had arrived. The task force consisted of 2 detectives and a forensics expert. Hello, I'm Captain Johnson, one introduced himself. This is Senior Lieutenant Smith. Tell me, did you touch anything here before we got here? Yes, a little Maggie replied. Well, you'll still have to give your fingerprints to our expert, so we can distinguish them from those of the criminals, said Captain Johnson. He began questioning Maggie, and Senior Lieutenant Smith talked to Samantha. The lieutenant did his job faster, and Samantha sat on the couch with Maggie. Captain Johnson continued to ask his questions. Do you suspect anyone? Has anyone threatened you? I've already been assaulted today, and we investigators Stephen was doing. I thought you police had some kind of staff liaison? Look, we can have several attacks like this in a day, And digitalization hasn't reached our department yet, the captain replied. Captain Johnson opened a folder and began to sort through the papers. Stephen, you say? Yeah, I got it, he said, apparently answering someone on his radio. Captain Johnson pulled out some kind of printout and took a quick look at it. So it's a little clearer now, although to be honest, not really. So, you suspect someone? You remember? Yes. I think the banker from the bank is behind this, Maggie said. You know, I expected to hear a lot of things, but not this. What could you have done to stop the banker? Maggie told the captain about her trip to the bank, about her inheritance, showed him the gold bar and held out the note she had left. Who else could it be if it wasn't him? Maggie concluded. Yes, that's very interesting. The captain examined the note from every angle. Did anyone else know about the gold? No, just me and my grandmother, who's been dead for 6 months. What about this girl here? The captain pointed to Samantha. Samantha, come on. She's my friend. And she found out about the gold after the attack. So what if she's a friend? The captain asked. You know, in my practice, I've had more than that. What close people have not attacked each other? Are you out of your mind? Samantha jumped up. I told you I didn't even know he was here. You just want to blame some random person. I get it, you're just bought by this bank. All in on it. Sit down, please, Captain Johnson told her in a stern voice. And control yourself. No one is bought by anyone, and no one is accusing you. And it's my job to suspect everyone, including you. But come on, Maggie interjected. This is really crazy. Samantha was with me the entire evening. She came to my aid at the first call. I don't want you to even suspect her. Unfortunately, our job doesn't depend on your wishes, the captain replied. Well, I think we'll come back to Samantha. The captain walked across the room and turned to Maggie. Here's what I'm not getting. Can you tell me? What's not beating? Maggie asked. It was obvious from the story that Maggie was already tired from the interrogation and sounded irritated and tired. But look, why would your banker set himself up like that? Leave a note. You might say, with the exact address of the bank she objected to Captain Johnson. So maybe he was counting on the fact that I, frightened, would run headlong back to the bank to give back the gold without even informing the police. That's right, said Samantha. Maybe they have it all automated. You check it out. We'll check. Captain Johnson looked at Samantha with disbelief. All the more reason not to. Let's say you get scared and take the gold back to the bank. Then the banker gets into your safe deposit box and takes the gold for himself. Okay, let's assume that the whole bank is in cahoots and they intend to take your gold, and none of the security officers or colleagues will ask your banker what he is doing. But still, the day will come when you will go to the bank to get your gold. Or just the next day you will get over the shock and run to complain to the police. Then a simple inquiry to the bank will reveal that there is no gold and the bankers will be arrested. It's just one big handmade setup. And if they have such a gangster scheme, why do we have no reports in our department related to this banker and this bank branch in general? With that kind of approach to crime, they'd be as screwed up as they are on the first case. You don't think that's crazy? Maggie shrugged helplessly and sighed. And that's why you suspect me? She asked. Samantha, unlike her friend, was still active. It's my job to suspect everyone, the captain replied. All right, suppose you didn't know about the gold. No, Maggie said quietly. I definitely told Samantha about the possible inheritance when I didn't know what was there. So you knew? Captain Johnson pointed his finger at Samantha. The situation became heated because of Captain Johnson's suspicions about Samantha. Captain, did you know that your friend Maggie had some unexpected wealth? What difference does it make what's in there? Even if you didn't know about the gold, you knew that the box could hypothetically contain something expensive. And you had your associates write the note to lead us on a wild goose chase to frame the banker. Isn't that right? Samantha was furious and unable to speak coherently. Maggie answered instead. Maggie, I distinctly remember telling Samantha at work today. I told her that some strange inheritance had come into existence, but that it couldn't possibly contain anything rich. In fact, it's probably a mistake. You must admit these words are hardly the sort of thing that would interest a criminal looking to make a fortune. Captain, maybe. But then tell me, Samantha, where were you when the apartment was robbed? Samantha, well, I already told your colleague everything. I was at the police station waiting for Maggie. Captain, so you weren't near Maggie and you were technically able to make calls and send messages? Samantha started to get indignant, ironically saying that she was supposedly running a gang of robbers from the precinct by phone. She tossed the captain her cell phone, offering to check correspondence and calls. The captain was a little embarrassed by this reaction from Samantha. Captain, okay, I get it. Let's go back to the banker. Let's say this was his first criminal endeavor. An inexperienced crook with a job at a bank at a young age decided to take up theft. The situation was tense. The captain temporarily backed off his suspicions about Samantha and decided to concentrate on the banker version. Captain Johnson once again picked up the note left on Maggie's desk. Captain, there is another circumstance that breaks the banker version. What is the purpose of this criminal group led by the treacherous banker? Samantha, what is it? To prey on lonely people, isn't it? But exclusively in gold? Maggie, what do you mean? Captain, if they wanted to rip you off, why didn't they take the dollars and earrings? It's not $1 million, but it's something. They didn't even bother organizing the whole thing and risking their freedom. Maggie, maybe they don't do small change. Samantha, then cross me out too. My accomplices would need that money too. Captain, yeah, you're right. Maggie, you sure you didn't know there was gold in the box? If your target was just the jewelry, you would have taken what's in here. Samantha sarcastically, really? Are you absolutely sure about that? Should I be searched and detained for 48 hours just in case? I could run away. Captain, tiredly, but why are you making fun of me? I'm telling you, it's my job. Look, these unfortunate bills to us in general, it turns out all versions ruined. So we're going to have to start over. Maggie, think back, please. Who else could theoretically know that you had the gold? Maggie, I don't know. No one but this banker knew I had the gold. But why didn't his accomplices take the other jewelry? I have no idea. Captain, well, we'll go to the bank tomorrow anyway and question him. Look, it's after 1 in the morning and we're still here. Well, thank you for your help with the investigation. If anything changes, you'll get a call right away. Please don't leave and stay in touch. The captain realized that the current leads had reached a dead end. He decided to end the interrogation for today and continue the investigation tomorrow, starting with the banker. Maggie and Samantha were left puzzled as to the motives of the perpetrators. Captain Johnson shifted his gaze to Samantha, and so did you. He signaled for the expert and the lieutenant to wrap up. Maggie started to escort the operatives out, but immediately stopped. Wait a minute, Johnson, she said. I got it. I'm sorry. Are you all right? The captain was surprised at Maggie's sudden insight. Can I get you some water? I understand why they didn't care about the other jewels, Maggie said. They were tasked with finding the gold bar, and it was banker Stephen Gromoff who did it. Look, you and I have spent so much time sitting here, reasoning, making logical connections, Johnson said. And now you're back to square one. But no, this version doesn't make sense. The captain persuaded Maggie, but she wasn't listening. She was looking for her grandmother's letter, which was in the gold box in the bank. What are you looking for? Johnson asked. Where is it? Maggie couldn't find the cardboard envelope containing the letter. Not that, citizen, said the expert, coming out of the next room with her grandmother's letter in his hands. Yes, Maggie exclaimed, taking the envelope from the employee. Thank you. I don't know how it got there. Now, wait a second, she said, taking the letter out of the envelope and looking for her great-grandfather's lines about imprisonment. But yes, of course, here it is. Look, Comrade Captain Johnson. Maggie walked up to the captain. One day they were spotted by a worker from the official mines. His name was Damian Gromoff. She read aloud a passage of the letter. The banker is a descendant, a grandson, I suppose, of a man who had a conflict with my grandfather over gold. Captain Johnson took the letter, read the lines himself, thought for half a minute and said, That's a very interesting cinematic version. But how can you be so sure that the banker is a descendant of the same Gromov? You don't even know what this friend or enemy of your grandfather looked like. Of course, our town is small, and the name Gromov is not the most common. But it's just a theory. It's not just a theory, Maggie persuaded the captain. It would be nothing more than an interesting conjecture if it weren't for all the other circumstances, Maggie said. You lacked motive to make the banker the prime suspect. And now you have one. All the crimes were committed in such a hatchet job because it was really his first case of this kind, she continued. Well, I mean, where did he get the opportunity to hire someone? That's for you to find out. But most importantly, we now have an answer to the question of motive. You're right, I don't dispute that, nodded Captain Johnson. But we still don't have enough evidence to make an immediate arrest. We have to investigate the bank itself. If we go after your banker now, we may not have enough evidence. Moreover, if the court refuses to arrest him because of this, he may flee with his accomplices. So tomorrow morning we'll go to the bank with the group, we'll look up the documentation, and only then we'll charge the banker, the captain decided. And if he refuses, saying, I don't know any Gromovs, we're just namesakes, maybe we can think of a way to catch him red-handed? I suggest you hook the chip to the gold bar, or give Samantha a fake gold bar with the chip already embedded, Maggie suggested. She'll deposit it in a safe deposit box, and as soon as the banker decides to steal it, you'll know about it. Oh, where are you all going? Johnson sighed heavily. Where am I going to get you a fake bullion with a chip for the night? And if you put something on a real one, a banker who has seen such ingots more than once in his life will immediately find out extra details on it. We can't be set up like this. We'll figure it out without chips on the spot. He's got accomplices, and it's possible they're bank employees. So it's important that we get the whole place in a flash. Then what do we do? Maggie asked. Go in good conscience tomorrow morning to another bank, suggested Maggie. Deposit the gold there. It would be safest. He's not going to clean out a whole bank for a bar. What about us? Samantha wondered. We'll work with your banker, I explained. But you're just going to leave us here overnight. What if he wants to try again and break into the apartment? Captain Johnson sighed heavily again. All right, Comrade Senior Lieutenant. Hasn't the squad car left yet? No, it's still there, the policeman answered. Then you and our driver stay in it near the entrance for the night, stand there and keep an eye on anyone who comes in here. And the expert and I will go in my car. It was obvious from the senior lieutenant's face that staying the night near the victim's entrance was not in his plans, but he would not disobey orders. The captain took a business card out of his pocket and handed it to Samantha. Here's my card. If you need anything, call me. The lieutenant will leave his phone number for you too. Samantha thanked the captain, and the task force finally left the apartment. Well, I'm going too. I won't keep you, Maggie said as she started to pack. Are you crazy? What if they track you down? No, stay here under guard. It's safer. Samantha wouldn't let her friend go home. But I'd feel safer with you, too, Maggie agreed. Okay, I'll stay. She went to the window. To think that just a few hours ago I had no idea I'd be guarded by the police. An adventure, don't tell me. Samantha went to the window too and looked down. There was a police truck with its lights on in front of the driveway. If you tell anyone, they won't believe you, she said. But I still don't understand. Why couldn't you go straight to the banker's house and arrest him? There's motive, there's evidence. Maybe they were just too lazy to look for him. Maybe he's not a registered resident? Maggie suggested. What then? Do we have to make an inquiry to the bank and talk to colleagues? It's not easy to do that at night, said Maggie. They're hoping to get those records from the bank. I don't like it anyway. What if it's not his shift tomorrow? Then what? I don't know, Samantha said. I don't want to get into the whole investigation thing. I just want it to be over sooner rather than later. Me too, Maggie said. And the friends were silent for a while. They stared at the wall and listened to the ticking of the antique clock. Each of them was thinking about something else. At one point, Maggie asked, "But now, what have you thought of? What are you going to do with the gold when it's all over?" Why do you ask for the second time already? Samantha grinned. No, let everything be over first, and then I'll think about it. To be honest, I'm less and less happy about this wealth. I'll have to get rid of it sooner rather than later. From bullion to happiness it does not bring you yet, agreed Maggie, but not yet. So don't be discouraged. Everything will be solved. The friends began to get ready for bed. Samantha stayed with Maggie in the other room, and she wanted to lie down on the sofa in the living room. With the lights off, Maggie said, "Listen, thank you." For what? Samantha didn't understand her friend. When that Captain Swan started to suspect me, you didn't even listen to him. You stood up for me. It only took me a split second to realize you'd believe him. Oh, really? I had no choice to suspect my friend of robbery. He's a cop. He's so confident in his theories. I'd have believed I'd organized the whole thing. The night was uneventful. Either the criminals were afraid of the police car at the entrance, or they were not going to do anything else today. In any case, the friends managed to get a good night's sleep after a hard day. The next morning, they decided to go to another bank to deposit the gold. Samantha thought for a long time, but did not dare to call Captain Swan to ask how things were going with the capture of the banker. She didn't want to distract the cop from his business. Maggie went straight to the window. "Samantha, did they leave?" she said excitedly. "Maybe they've caught them all and we're out of danger." Samantha suggested timidly, glancing at the empty parking space by the driveway. "All right, let's figure this out. Hurry up with the ingots. Then we'll call that Captain Swan." The friends packed up and walked down to the car. Maggie drove very carefully, as if she was driving for the first time and was afraid of hitting someone. "So, no tail? Can't you see it?" she asked Samantha worriedly. "No, I'm fine." "Go ahead," Samantha replied calmly, looking carefully through all the windows. But no sooner had the car left the courtyards and entered the main street than it was struck in the side by an old Jiguli. Two young men got out of them, came up to Maggie's car and started pounding with their hands, demanding to open the door. "Stay where you are," Maggie said loudly, checking that the doors were locked. I'm sitting. Samantha pulled out her cell phone and began frantically dialing Captain Swan's number. At that moment, one police car and one civilian car pulled up to the scene of the accident. The operatives who came out of there quickly rounded up the two assailants and placed them in the police car. One of the operatives was Captain Swan, who approached Maggie's car. Maggie didn't immediately realize she had to open the door, but she let the policeman into the back seat. "I apologize for putting you through this," the captain said, "but there was no quicker or more effective way to catch the accomplices red-handed." "So you mean to say that you sent us to give the gold to another bank on purpose?" Samantha asked after a bit of shock. "I'm telling you, it was the quickest and most efficient way. But we didn't have hard evidence. We didn't. All those amazing stories about grandfathers and a conniving banker sounded convincing, but not to a court of law. And now we've got ironclad. I think we'll finish them off for a while and they'll give up their banker. Don't worry about the car, we'll sort it out. The main thing is that you are alive and well, and all the criminals are caught," said Captain Swan. "But almost all of them, like almost. The banker hasn't been caught yet." Surprised Maggie. "In the next few hours, I think he'll be caught. So let's get in my car. I'll drive you to your bank. The car will be examined by experts. Then it will be taken to the service parking lot. So I'll be your cab driver today." Captain Swan drove Samantha and Maggie to another bank where Samantha successfully deposited the bullion in a safe deposit box. The friends never recovered from the emergency shock, and therefore could not realize the extent of the danger the captain had put them in. Probably, if they had realized it, they would have communicated with the captain differently. On the way out of the bank, the policeman's cell phone rang. "Hello, I'm listening." "Oh yeah? Is this it? That's great. We'll be there soon." The captain hung up the phone and turned to his girlfriends. "Well, you'll never guess the names of today's attackers." "Was it Stephen?" Samantha asked in surprise. "That's right. It's the whole family gang. The attackers are your banker's brother and nephew who just turned him in. We have information that Stephen is on shift today. So I suggest we go right now to apprehend him." 10 minutes later, the captain's car and his entourage were outside the bank where Stephen worked. Another police car was already parked near it, and the patrol officers together with the senior lieutenant were waiting for a command from the captain. "You two," the captain looked at the patrolman. "Go to the service entrance of the bank. The lieutenant and I will go in from the front." The captain shifted, looking at Samantha. "Do you want to come with us?" "Yes," Samantha answered unexpectedly firmly. She wanted to look into the eyes of the criminal who had arranged such an adventure for her. The captain, the senior lieutenant, and Samantha walked leisurely into the bank. The captain silently showed his ID to the bank employee standing at the entrance and made his way into the hall. At the farthest window sat Stephen. He saw the operatives at first, but paid no attention to them, probably because they were in civilian clothes. But when Samantha came into his field of vision, Stephen jumped up, looked around, and rushed toward the office. "He's so fast." Captain Swan grinned and headed for the service room. It opened with a special card, so he asked the bank employees sitting at the next window to let them through. The captain took his time. He realized that his colleagues had probably already grabbed Stephen on the way out. When the female employee opened the door, it turned out that this was indeed the case. In the bank's small employee break room sat Stephen, with 2 patrolmen standing beside him. Apparently, the banker did not resist the arrest. "But why are you running, mister?" "Stephen, we wanted to talk to you, and you're running." The captain sat down on the chair opposite him. "I won't tell you anything." "I need a lawyer," Stephen whispered back. He will, a lawyer, the captain assured him. "But your relatives have already testified. Yesterday's call detail from your home phone won't work in your favor either. Moreover, we even know everything about the motive." At that time, a stately man in his 60s entered the room. "What's going on here?" he asked. "Service room." "Operational activities," answered the captain. "And who are you, exactly?" "The bank manager," the man replied in a bass voice. "You're just in time, Mr. Manager. Your employee is suspected of organizing a theft and attempt on human life." "What attempt on life?" Stephen was surprised. "What kind of attempt? And when a car deliberately crashes into another car, is that not attempted murder?" The captain asked him. "What have they done?" The banker covered his face with his hands. "Or maybe your relatives made it up, and you had nothing to do with it." "No," Stephen whispered. "It was all my idea." "Yes, you see how wonderful. You don't even deny anything," summed up Captain Swan. "Stephen, how could you?" Stephen was shamed by the superintendent. "You've been one of the best employees in years. Not a single suspicion or reprimand. And now you've decided to take advantage of a client and retroactively terminate your employment. I don't want our bank's name on any criminal reports." "If it's any consolation," Captain Swan said to the manager, Stephen wasn't acting out of self-interest. He didn't want to profit from his clients, he was motivated by personal motives. But of course, to do such a thing because of some dispute from the past does not justify it. The captain turned to the senior lieutenant. "Comrade Senior Lieutenant, ask the bank manager a few questions." The lieutenant left to talk to the manager. Only Captain Swan, Samantha, and Stephen remained in the room. Patrolmen stood near the entrance. "This isn't just a dispute from the past," Stephen began to say. "It was a matter of honor, family honor." He looked at Samantha penetratingly. "Your grandfather framed mine and took away what was rightfully our family's." "What are you talking about?" "I know the story. My grandfather didn't set anyone up. Did your grandfather rat on him, which is why we put him away?" "Of course he did. Who would tell you the truth? Listen to me. Your grandfather simply took the gold my grandfather made. At first, my grandfather managed to get some justice and helped put your grandfather in jail. But he never returned the gold. Therefore, when my grandfather came to ask for his gold again after his release, your grandfather set him up, imitated an attack on himself. He wrote something to the police, and that was it. By that time, my grandfather worked almost all the time at distant mines and mines and mines, and his health was badly shaken. Of course, he couldn't stand the prison term and died. And then I saw your surname, saw the gold, clarified the personal data of your grandmother. And it all made sense to me at once. I called my brother, and we hatched a plan to get the gold from your apartment. I gave him and my nephew the address. They drove there and waited for you. You won't believe this, but they witnessed the attack on you. So the two men who approached me during the attack were your relatives? Samantha wondered. Apparently, yes. That's what they told me. Then my brother and nephew waited until you left home and started looking for gold. We didn't find the gold, Stephen continued. We realized that the day after the incident you would definitely go to another bank to deposit it. So we decided to take the most radical step possible. They didn't have to come at you. I'm sure it was an accident. The plan was simply to stop the car and ask for the gold. Asking is a good idea, Captain Swan replied sarcastically. We did not want to put your life in danger, but the honor of the family. The captain shouted to the patrolman. Take this one down to the station. The cops led Stephen away, and the captain and Samantha walked out the service entrance and stopped. Wait, I just don't get it. Who was this first attacker who wanted to take my purse from my front doorway? Samantha asked. Just a mugger, replied Captain Swan. Coincidence. It would have been a surprise if he'd been able to snatch your purse and seen the gold in it. The people who rescued me were going to rob me, Samantha sighed heavily. And there's more to the story. I should believe him, not my grandmother. You don't have to believe anything, the captain reassured her. Both versions have a right to exist. But if Stephen sincerely believed that my grandfather framed his grandfather, then his reaction is understandable. There are many mitigating circumstances in this case, and personal motive, and carelessness, and the fact of saving you from the first robber. But still, they committed a crime and will get the punishment they deserve. I don't think they'll be in jail for very long, but a couple of years for sure. Well, we'll see what the court decides. It's been a while since then. The court took into account all the mitigating circumstances and sentenced the banker, his brother and nephew, to a 1.5 years in a penal colony. After the trial, Samantha decided to go to the bank again, only to the bank where she had deposited the gold. When she came out of there, she called Kate and offered to meet her at her house. An hour later, the friends were sitting on the couch in the living room drinking tea. Well, I reread Grandma's letter and thought it over, Maggie said. Indeed, it was dangerous to own gold, so I've decided to get rid of it. What? Samantha was surprised. You sold the bullion? I did. Maggie went to her bag and pulled out a puffy envelope. It's for you, she said. Samantha took the envelope in her hands and pulled out a wad of bills. Thank you, let's just say it's for car repairs, Maggie said. But insurance covered most of it, didn't it? Well, it's just for moral damages. You've suffered so much because of me, taking risks, getting in accidents. I can't imagine how you must have felt when you suffered so much because of my problems. Oh, come on, man, it's an adventure. Samantha exclaimed. My life is home, work, home, work. At least here I have some variety. Did it make you feel needed? I haven't felt as much emotion in the last 5 years as I did that day. So how could I say no to your help? You couldn't. Somehow I didn't even think you could say no. So I'm asking you to take this envelope, consider it another request. Thank you, Samantha carefully put the envelope in her bag. And the rest of it? Have you finally figured out where to spend it? She asked and laughed. Yes, this time I have, Maggie replied, smiling. It took me a long time to think about it, but where? Should I go into real estate? I've heard that the market is in demand right now and we need to act fast. No, not real estate, Maggie said calmly. What about stocks? Oh, come on. I don't know anything about stocks. But you've always been a smart girl. And not in stocks. Then where? You see, this money, this gold, it's really of dubious origin. Of course, I believe every word my grandmother said, but some of the information she might not have known. That's why I didn't dare to spend the money just to enrich myself. There's a foundation called Singing Hearts. It helps sick children. It seemed right to send the rest of the money there. I live alone. I have a salary and an apartment. And they need the money badly. I think this will be the best final chord in the half-century-long dispute between the two families.